Young tech millionaire runs into the nurse who once saved his life only to uncover a shocking truth: she's now pregnant with his child. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The glow of city lights flickered like distant stars in the late-hour sky, their reflections dancing upon the sleek glass walls of Jared Brandt's penthouse suite. Although his name was known across tech circles and international business magazines, Jared himself leaned against the massive floor-to-ceiling window, feeling oddly unmoored. Even there, perched among the tallest skyscrapers, his reflection felt like a stranger staring back. All the success, the luxury, and the constant buzz of his phone, it never quite replaced what he secretly yearned for: an authentic human connection. But that was Jared before the accident. Before his life collided with a young nurse named Caitlin who would forever change the course of his journey. In the hush of early morning, in a private hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and coffee left too long on the burner, Caitlin's gentle voice pulled him back from the brink. He was in a coma for nearly a week, so close to the edge that even the doctors looked grim. That day, when Jared's eyes first fluttered open, he thought the light fixture above seemed otherworldly. Then he saw her, Caitlin, exhausted but hopeful, leaning over his bed. The memory of that moment lingered in Jared's mind like a spark, reminding him that there was a world beyond board meetings and profit margins. Now, months after his discharge, the memory still felt more real than the city bustling outside his window. Few people knew that he owed his life to a nurse who refused to give up on him. Fewer still realized that, for all his brilliance in engineering and foresight in business, he had been profoundly unprepared for what it meant to truly need someone else. Everyone saw Jared the tycoon, the self-made innovator who skyrocketed an AI-based startup into a billion-dollar empire. But only one person had seen Jared at his most vulnerable, battered by the crash, drifting between life and death, utterly helpless. And that person was Caitlin. Caitlin Willow had grown up worlds apart from Jared, where he was all sleek electronics, fast cars, and sophisticated soirees. She was the small-town girl turned dedicated nurse, someone who believed in kindness first and everything else second. She had chosen nursing as an act of service. For her, there was a certain magic in caring for someone when they were at their weakest, in telling them, without words, that no one deserved to go through pain alone. During Jared's hospital stay, she'd heard all the gossip about him. He's that tech prodigy. He's got unimaginable wealth. He rubs elbows with celebrities. He probably doesn't even remember normal people exist. But in the hours she spent at his bedside, adjusting his IV, watching the monitors, speaking softly about the little things, his precarious heartbeat told a different story. Money and fame seemed irrelevant in the presence of mortality. Late one evening, after Jared first opened his eyes, Caitlin found herself quietly singing an old lullaby, half to soothe him, half to comfort herself. Jared was disoriented and every muscle screamed in protest, but he managed a faint smile. That was their first real connection, simple yet profound. Over the following days, in small increments of conversation, they bridged the gap between a billionaire's life and the day-to-day reality of a compassionate nurse. Caitlin wasn't easily impressed by status, and Jared had never met someone who treated him so earnestly as just another human being. He noticed how her eyes shone with sincerity. She noticed how behind all that driven ambition and brilliance, Jared had a quiet heart that hadn't forgotten how to hope. By the time Jared was deemed well enough to leave, Caitlin felt both relief and a twinge of sadness. She had grown accustomed to seeing him recover, step by step, breath by breath. He had grown accustomed to her presence, the calm in her voice, the unwavering support that kept him steady. So, on the day they parted, neither was prepared for the sudden rush of emotion. A hug to say goodbye turned into a moment that changed everything. a shared closeness that lit a spark between them. They spent Jared's last evening in that hospital talking about things that had little to do with money or business. Art, the way the night sky looked in Caitlin's hometown, the fleetingness of life. Their conversation felt like glimpsing an undiscovered part of each other's universe. He learned how she faced the heartbreak of losing patients, but also the joy of seeing them walk away healthy. She learned that under his carefully polished exterior was a man who rarely let people in, who had lost his parents as a teen, who built an empire partly as a shield against the loneliness that loss created. As twilight dissolved into dawn, Jared felt a gentle ache that he couldn't name, but it felt startlingly close to genuine affection. There was a moment when the beeping machines, the chemical smell of antiseptics, the distant chatter of the night shift staff all faded, and it was just them, two people who'd found a fragile bond in the unlikeliest of places. They leaned in, and that shared intimacy, an impulsive kiss, an entanglement of hands, felt like it held the promise of something both fragile and electrifying. When Jared left the hospital, he carried more than just a new appreciation for life. He carried Caitlin's number written in a simple nurse's note. She had scrawled it down with a small heart next to the words, "In case you need to talk or if your recovery plan needs adjusting." They both laughed at how clinical yet personal it felt. Over the next few weeks, Jared wrestled with therapy sessions for his injuries, investor calls that piled up the minute the world realized he was stable enough to work, and media curiosity about his accident. But late at night, as he stared at that phone number, he discovered an uncharacteristic hesitance. He could sway an entire board of directors, but contacting the nurse who'd saved him, who'd seen him at his weakest, that felt far more daunting. It wasn't until his assistant reminded him that he had a follow-up appointment, one that Caitlin had personally recommended, that he finally found an excuse to call. She picked up in the middle of her shift. There was background noise, monitors, murmuring voices, the hum of hospital life. "It's good to hear from you," she said in a gentle tone that made Jared's heart twist in a way he hadn't expected. Over the phone, they fell into an easy conversation, picking up precisely where they left off. She teased him about not forgetting his physical therapy. He teased her back, claiming the hospital missed her lullabies. In that moment, it felt so simple to reconnect, until Jared realized he was asking if she'd grab coffee someday soon. She said yes. That coffee turned into a walk by the riverside. A single evening turned into a few more clandestine meetups, partly because Jared's face was recognizable and the paparazzi had been swirling like sharks since rumors of his recovery started. But there was a warmth in those stolen hours. They laughed about how, in a matter of weeks, they went from nurse and patient to something that felt more genuine and full of possibility. Caitlin learned more about his orphaned childhood and how coding had been Jared's escape from grief. Jared learned about her passion for volunteering at a free clinic on weekends, how she dreamed of opening a community health center in underserved areas. They were an unlikely pair, but somehow that made sense to them. One crisp evening, Jared insisted on cooking Caitlin dinner at his penthouse, despite never being known for culinary skills. The result was a comedic combination of smoke alarms and a half-burnt pasta sauce that left them breathless with laughter. In that chaotic meal, there was more intimacy than any lavish dinner at the city's best restaurant could have provided. When the night ended, candles flickering low, the city lights shimmering behind them, both Jared and Caitlin felt that a different kind of bond was forming, one that went beyond a chance encounter in a hospital ward. But fate has a way of weaving surprises into the tapestry of our lives. And soon, a secret that neither expected would force them to confront how deeply they cared for each other. Life often spirals in ways that no algorithm or medical chart can predict. It was only a few months after Jared's accident that a piece of news arrived, quietly yet potent enough to reshape everything. Caitlin was pregnant. She had felt the changes in her body for days, suspecting but too afraid to confirm. When she finally mustered the courage to take the test in her tiny bathroom, Her uniform folded neatly on the sink, she stared at the positive result with trembling hands, emotions swirling between shock, wonder, and fear. Meanwhile, Jared's life soared back to its usual high-pressure routine. He was finalizing negotiations on a new AI partnership, juggling interviews from finance magazines, and fielding questions about expansions to Asia. But his mind often drifted back to Caitlin. Some days he'd catch himself rereading their text exchanges, smiling at the memories of her irreverent humor. Yet, an unsettling feeling nagged at him, as though he sensed a tidal shift on the horizon. Their relationship, still new and raw, felt delicate. Could it survive the weight of the world's spotlight? When Caitlin finally decided to call him the same day she confirmed her pregnancy, the phone rang for an agonizingly long time. "Jared?" Her voice wavered. She tried to be steady, professional even, because that's how she was used to handling emergencies. But this was no ordinary scenario. He answered, preoccupied, but as soon as he registered the tremor in her tone, his attention sharpened. "What's wrong?" he asked, stepping away from the noise of the office. There was a beat of silence. Caitlin could almost picture him bracing for the answer. And then she told him. Shock rippled through him. He felt the threads of his carefully organized world rearranging, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a monumental, life-altering one. He heard his own voice whisper, "Pregnant. Are you sure?" And immediately hated how uncertain he sounded. Yet, in the next moment, he asked if she was okay, if she was scared, if she needed anything. Her breath caught. She realized she'd never heard him sound so vulnerable. "We'll figure this out," he said at last, that firm resolve returning to his voice, as if no challenge in the world could eclipse this new responsibility. How do two individuals, one catapulted by wealth and relentless ambition, the other steadfast and selfless, navigate the collision of fame, new parenthood, and a budding love story? The news of Caitlin's pregnancy wouldn't stay private for long, especially once whispers leaked to the tabloids that the reclusive billionaire had a new woman in his life. Outside the hospital where Caitlin worked, paparazzi started camping out, trying to snap pictures of the rumored mother-to-be. At Jared's office, a wave of gossip spread among employees. Some predicted a scandal, others speculated if he'd continue his bachelor ways. But the chaos swirled around them like a vortex, forcing Jared and Caitlin to cling to each other tighter than ever before. And so begins the journey they never could have planned for. Their story, a nurse who'd sworn to save lives and a mogul who'd once believed he could thrive without emotional attachments, was about to face the ultimate test. Would they confront the storm of media attention, the expectations of Jared's world, and the medical challenges that come with an unplanned pregnancy? And more importantly, how would they preserve the profound bond they'd forged in those quiet hospital hours? In the hush of his penthouse, Jared sat with Caitlin, both of them gazing out at the same city lights that once mirrored his own restlessness. Now, in those scattered points of illumination, he saw a future shaped by more than just business ventures. He saw hope, fear, and a promise of family he had never dared to imagine. The news of Caitlin's pregnancy spread faster than either of them anticipated, rippling through Jared's world in the same way a stone disturbs the still surface of a pond. In the quiet comfort of his penthouse, the place that once felt like a refuge from the demands of corporate life, Jared found himself straining to concentrate on even the simplest tasks. He gazed out over the nighttime skyline, each building lit up like a luminous chess piece in a game he'd once mastered. But the game had changed. He was no longer playing solely with investors, board members, or markets. He was now contending with the realization that life's most profound responsibilities were personal, delicate, and all too real. Caitlin sat across from him, wearing one of his oversized sweatshirts and jeans she'd brought from her small apartment. Her hands pressed protectively against her abdomen. The city lights scattered across her expression, casting flickers of light that mirrored both her excitement and her fears. They had just come from her first official prenatal visit. She'd handled the appointment with her usual composed demeanor, nodding attentively as the OB/GYN described the stages of fetal development, the recommended vitamins, and the next steps for her medical care. Jared, uncharacteristically quiet, had let the doctor's words wash over him, only interrupting to ask if there was anything special Caitlin needed or any additional tests they should schedule. His staff had arranged for the best medical care money could buy, and yet, for the first time, Jared worried that no level of professional expertise could guarantee that he'd be a good father. He circled the kitchen island, absent-mindedly toying with a half-empty cup of coffee. "Are you okay?" Caitlin asked gently. Even though she was the one whose body was changing, she recognized the strain on Jared's face. He looked up, as if realizing only then that she was observing him so closely. I'm fine," he began, trying to steady his voice. "Just a lot to process." A small, understanding smile tilted at the corner of her lips. "I know," she said, "but we'll figure it out." They were growing used to repeating that phrase. "We'll figure it out." It had become their shared mantra, a beacon of reassurance whenever doubt crept in. Yet every time they said it, the world outside this penthouse seemed to spin on a more relentless axis. Word of Jared's impending fatherhood leaked to gossip columnists who had once speculated about his love life, or lack thereof. Caitlin's phone buzzed with calls from unknown numbers. His corporate PR team scrambled to manage the narrative about the baby news, worried it might distract from the upcoming product launch or disturb investor confidence. Suddenly, Jared had to juggle being a caretaker to a fragile relationship and a father-to-be while maintaining the facade of unwavering control that his business empire demanded. He dreaded seeing his name and Caitlin's in the tabloids or on half-baked social media rumors. True to form, the sensational headlines started popping up. Tech giant's secret fling, now a baby on the way, nurse next door becomes billionaire's unexpected heir maker, or is this the end of Brant's bachelorhood? The inaccurate, even insulting insinuations made Jared's blood boil, but Caitlin urged calm. "They don't know us," she said, her voice unwavering. "They don't know how we met, what we've been through. It's noise, just noise." He admired her grace. Where others might have panicked, she seemed focused on protecting her sanity, and by extension, the peace he so badly needed. One afternoon, the tumult found its way to Caitlin's workplace. As she clocked in at the hospital, a cluster of paparazzi lurked outside, cameras angled to capture every step. The glare of the flashbulbs carried inside, turning heads among the other nurses. Her immediate supervisor, noticing Caitlin's flustered expression, guided her into a storage room for a private moment. "Are you all right?" the older nurse asked, concern etched into her features. Caitlin forced a small, tired laugh. "I guess I'm going to be the center of a lot of attention for a while." The supervisor squeezed her hand, reminding Caitlin that her place in this hospital was secure. "Don't let them rattle you, dear. You're a good nurse. That matters more than who you're dating or what the tabloids say." For a moment, Caitlin's heart felt warm with gratitude. Not everyone at work would be this understanding. Some harbored envy or skepticism, but at least a few recognized the person beneath the rumors. Meanwhile, Jared received an unexpected visitor at his office, his longtime mentor and major investor, Lucas Greenford. A refined, older gentleman, Greenford had supported Jared's very first tech project, a naive coding venture run out of a dingy apartment. Jared had always admired him, almost like a father figure since the day they crossed paths. Yet that morning, the man's usual encouraging smile was replaced by a stern expression. He walked into Jared's glass-walled office, nodded curtly at Jared's assistant, and closed the door with a decisive push. Jared straightened in his executive chair, bracing for the conversation. "I saw the news," Lucas said without preamble. "Congratulations, I suppose." Jared waited, sensing there was more. A child is a blessing, don't get me wrong, but you realize how this changes everything." He gestured vaguely at the world outside the glass. "Investors are skittish. They wonder if your priorities will shift. They're concerned about your public image, about potential lawsuits if things go sour. You understand, don't you?" For a moment, Jared was torn between defensiveness and resignation. He'd always known that success came at a price, the dissection of one's private life. He looked Lucas in the eye. "The company's fundamentals are still strong. I'm not stepping away from my responsibilities." Lucas's brow furrowed. "I don't doubt your capabilities, Jared, but it's not just about you now. That nurse you're involved with, Caitlin, she's about to be thrust into a world she doesn't know. I hope you can protect her, because if you can't, the sharks will circle, and once they smell vulnerability—" He trailed off, letting the unspoken warning linger. Jared swallowed, a flicker of anger sparking in his chest. "Caitlin's not some naive bystander," he said carefully, "and I won't let anyone manipulate this situation." Lucas's expression softened just a bit. "Then be prepared for every storm, because a storm's coming." The tension weighed on Jared's mind for the rest of the day. By the time he got home, Caitlin was there, curled on his couch with a stack of pregnancy books she'd borrowed from the hospital's library. She glanced up. "Tough day?" He sank next to her, rubbing his forehead. "I had a chat with Lucas. Investors are jittery. The board is anxious." Her hand found his arm, a gentle reassurance. "You're worried about how they'll treat you and me." He exhaled. "Yes. Sometimes I feel like I'm juggling a million fragile pieces and one slip could break everything." She shifted closer, turning fully toward him. "Jared, you've survived a near-fatal crash. You've built a tech empire from almost nothing. You found the strength to let yourself love again, something that wasn't easy for you. I see that. This is just another challenge. We can handle it together." The sincerity in her eyes both comforted and humbled him. "I love you," he murmured, almost testing the words, though they felt undeniably real. Caitlin's eyes glistened, and she responded by pressing her forehead to his, whispering the same vow. For a few blissful moments, as they clung to each other, the penthouse felt like a bubble that the outside chaos couldn't penetrate. But real life seldom grants more than fleeting reprieves. The next morning, Jared discovered that his legal team had emailed him at dawn. The tabloids were preparing to run a story claiming Caitlin got pregnant intentionally to trap him. Another rumor circulated that Caitlin was selling details of Jared's personal life to the press. Lies, of course, but destructive ones if left unchecked. Worse, an anonymous tip suggested someone from within Jared's own circle might be feeding the media. A jealous colleague? A resentful acquaintance from the early days? When Caitlin saw the bruising headlines plastered across her phone screen in bold, lurid font, she froze. Despite all her reminders to herself that tabloid gossip was just noise, this felt personal. The insinuations that she was a gold digger, or that her care for Jared had been a scheme, cut deeper than she anticipated. She recalled the nights she'd sat beside his hospital bed, worried whether he would pull through. She recalled how her heart had hammered in her chest when she realized she was pregnant, how she'd paced her small apartment, wondering how to tell him and whether he'd believe she was sincere. Now, strangers were rewriting that heartfelt story into a shallow cliché. Wordlessly, Jared found her in the kitchen. He saw the article on her screen, the hateful comments, the trashy speculation, and gently took the phone from her. "Please don't read any more of that," he said. "None of it's true." She swallowed. "But it hurts, Jared. I've spent my life trying to help people, to be honest, to do some good in the world, and now—" Her voice broke. Jared pulled her into his arms. "I know. I wish I could shield you from all of it, but all I can promise is that I'm in this with you. 100%. The next few weeks tested that promise. Caitlin tried to maintain her normal schedule at the hospital, though the paparazzi presence made it nearly impossible. Some colleagues looked at her with sympathy, others with envy, a few with veiled judgment. Meanwhile, Jared's phone seemed never to stop ringing, from his PR advisors, from anxious shareholders, from friends who claimed to be concerned, but mostly wanted gossip. In the swirl of it all, they found small moments of refuge, quiet dinners where they played music and ignored their phones, prenatal checkups that reminded them a new life was blooming under all this chaos. Each heartbeat they heard on the ultrasound felt like a flicker of hope, an undeniable sign that life was bigger than rumors and finances. Then, amid the furor, a surprising shift began to occur. Some of the same outlets that had sensationalized their story started changing their tune. A well-respected columnist wrote a piece about Jared's philanthropic work, praising Caitlin's background as a nurse who had volunteered in underserved communities. Another segment featured an interview with a grateful patient of Caitlin's defending her character. It was as if the world was beginning to see their authenticity, not just the scandal. Yet, as any public figure knows, the winds of opinion can change abruptly. Jared and Caitlin had no illusions that they were out of the woods. In fact, hidden behind the fleeting wave of positive coverage was a deeper pressure. Insiders from Jared's board of directors hinted that if the drama continued, the company might suffer and he might be asked to take a step back. Or worse, they might orchestrate a leadership change. Jared had built the company from scratch, but as it often goes, once a corporation grows huge, its founder can be outnumbered by others more invested in the bottom line. It was unthinkable that he'd be forced out, but it wasn't impossible. Late one night, Jared typed furiously at his laptop, drafting a statement to address the rumors and confirm his unwavering commitment to both the company and his future family. Caitlin quietly approached, sliding a hand over his shoulder. "Everything okay?" she asked. He exhaled and closed the laptop, just trying to keep everything from imploding. A half-sad, half-grateful smile traced across her face. "You can't do everything alone." Jared nodded, taking in the gentle reminder. "I know, but for so long, I've only had myself to rely on." Caitlin sat down, meeting his gaze. "Now you have me, and soon we'll have someone else who'll count on us both. I want to help, Jared, if you'll let me." His heart pounded. It wasn't easy for him to hand over trust, to let another person stand shoulder to shoulder with him in a battle that had always been his alone. But if there was anyone who'd proved their loyalty, it was Caitlin. He nodded, resting his forehead against hers. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. She kissed him softly, and they both felt the unspoken hope between them, that this child, this shared future, might just anchor them through the storms to come. For a brief stretch of days, life reached a fragile balance, like a lull between gusts in a gathering storm. The tabloids, after writing a surge of scandalous headlines about Jared and Caitlin's relationship, retreated into milder speculation. His PR team rolled out carefully worded statements confirming the pregnancy and emphasizing that Jared Brandt was thrilled to embrace fatherhood. Sensing the public's softened reaction, some investors exhaled with relief. Officially, things were looking up. Behind the scenes, however, Jared and Caitlin knew the peace was tenuous. She had taken a short leave from her nursing job, a painful decision, but the paparazzi lurking outside the hospital made it nearly impossible for her to do her work. The hospital administration asked her gently to consider stepping away until the media frenzy died down, promising her position would be waiting. Her co-workers, those who believed her sincerity, sent messages of support. Yet Caitlin felt adrift, missing the routines and purpose of her shift schedules. Nursing was a calling, not just a paycheck. Jared, worried about her restlessness, tried to keep her days busy in healthier ways. He flew in her best friend Tessa from Caitlin's hometown, arranging for Tessa to stay in a suite of a nearby hotel. That first evening, Tessa arrived breathless with excitement. "Girl, "I couldn't believe it when you told me everything on the phone," Tessa exclaimed, enveloping Caitlin in a hug that spoke volumes. "You've been through so much, and I've only been able to read about you two in tabloids. Finally, I get to see you in person." The warmth of Tessa's presence reminded Caitlin of simpler times, weekend picnics, late-night movie marathons, her old life before all this. Meanwhile, Jared recognized that Tessa's visit let him focus on a looming predicament at his company. A major product launch, a new AI-driven software predicted to disrupt entire industries, was just weeks away. Jared's responsibilities piled up, from strategic meetings to finalizing partnerships. Uncertainty lay beneath every conversation. Would the board truly support him if the negative press continued? Were there forces inside the company that wanted him out? Or was it merely paranoid speculation fueled by stress? One afternoon, while Caitlin was out with Tessa shopping for maternity clothes, Jared convened his most trusted inner circle in the sleek corporate conference room with panoramic windows. The city skyline stretched behind them. Facing Jared were his COO, Maya Ellis, and his longtime chief legal advisor, Wilson Crane. Maya spoke first, her posture direct and confident. "The product is nearly ready," she said, "but we've hit a snag in negotiations with one of our international partners. Apparently, some are spooked by the rumor that you might be stepping down, or that your attention is elsewhere." Her gaze was steady, not accusatory, but concerned. Wilson jumped in, pushing a set of documents across the long table. "We need you to sign off on these assurances. Essentially, a commitment that your personal matters won't interfere with the timeline. The board wants it on record." Jared bristled at the implication. Sign a promise that he wouldn't let fatherhood affect the company's big launch. On one hand, he understood the pressure. Billions of dollars and thousands of jobs hinged on Brant Tech's success. On the other hand, the request felt like an intrusion into his private life, a contractual obligation that he remain undistracted. He drummed his fingers on the glossy table. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly, scanning Wilson's expression. Wilson sighed. "It's not a legal ultimatum, but refusal might signal to certain board members that you don't have your priorities straight. They could interpret it as you being unreliable, or that you don't plan to stay in the CEO role long term." Maya leaned forward, her tone gentle. "Jared, I know how important Caitlin is to you, but we're talking about your entire company. Sometimes we have to make concessions to keep the bigger picture intact." He closed his eyes, tension coursing through him. "I'm not handing over my personal life to them," he said flatly, "and I'm not stepping away from fatherhood either." The words echoed in the silent room. After a long pause, Wilson tentatively replied, "What if we rephrase these documents? Something less invasive. Just an addendum to reassure our partners that the launch date is firm. No mention of your personal situation." Jared exhaled, some of the stiffness leaving his shoulders. "Fine, do that, and I'll look it over." As Maya and Wilson left, Jared remained, staring at the skyline, feeling the enormity of his dual responsibilities. He'd once believed that controlling everything was possible. Now, fatherhood tested that assumption, showing him that life was less about control and more about balance. That evening, he came home to find Caitlin and Tessa on the penthouse balcony, sorting through baby name books and cooing over baby clothes. Tessa's laughter rang clear as she teased Caitlin. "You used to say you'd name your first daughter after that nurse you admired in high school. Wasn't it something like Bernadette?" Caitlin made a face. "I was 15. I've grown out of that phase, thank goodness." They caught sight of Jared at the balcony door, looking half exhausted. "Hey," Caitlin said softly, setting aside a pastel onesie. "Long day?" He nodded, but Tessa hopped up. "I'll go grab us some mocktails," she announced with a bright grin, disappearing inside to give them a moment alone. Jared sank into the chair beside Caitlin, the city lights shimmering below. She gently twined her fingers with his. "You look like you're carrying a boulder on your back," she murmured. He nodded again, aware of how quickly her gaze read him. It's just the final stretch before the product launch. Investors, the board, they're worried I'm losing focus. Caitlin studied his face, a flicker of hurt crossing her features. Because of me and the baby? He let out a weary breath. They won't say it outright, but yes. They're drafting these documents to ensure I'm committed to the timeline. It feels so intrusive. She squeezed his hand, her empathy clear. I'm sorry. You've worked so hard for this, and I hate that I'm part of the reason they question you. Jared placed a hand on her belly, the subtle swell barely visible beneath her sweater. Don't say that, he whispered. You and this baby are the biggest blessing. The rest is just noise I have to manage. His eyes shifted to the city's neon horizon. I built all this to feel powerful, but power doesn't compare to what I feel when I think about meeting our child. Caitlin's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I feel the same, she said. For a moment they let the hush of the evening envelop them, hearts beating in tandem as they pictured a future where boardroom politics weren't overshadowing every step. Then Tessa returned, holding a tray of colorful mocktails. She set it down with theatrical flair. A toast, she declared, handing each a glass. To a tiny new life, and to you two figuring out how to keep your sanity in this crazy world. They clinked glasses, smiling at each other. Jared took a sip of the sweet, fizzy drink, relieved for the small joys in front of him. Beneath that fleeting contentment, though, a quiet sense of urgency coiled. He had to finalize the AI project, secure investor confidence, and navigate a web of corporate politics, all while safeguarding Caitlin from the onslaught of media scrutiny and ensuring she felt comfortable, safe, and loved. The next morning, an opportunity arose to turn the tide of public perception. An influential tech conference invited Jared to be a keynote speaker, the perfect platform to show the world that he was very much in control. Publicly, he could discuss the upcoming AI product, exude confidence, and subtly dispel rumors that fatherhood was derailing him. Jared's immediate reaction was reluctance. He hated public speaking more than people knew. But the PR team insisted this was golden, so he accepted. With that decision, the next few days felt like stepping onto a meticulously set stage. Jared drafted his speech, focusing on the breakthroughs of the new software. His staff organized every detail, from lighting to Q&A sessions with the press. Meanwhile, Caitlin, aware that any public appearance of hers could cause a stir, asked if he wanted her there. It might distract from your message, she pointed out, though he sensed she also felt uncertain about stepping into a public event so soon. Jared mulled it over. He pictured scanning the crowd, eyes drifting to the one person he drew strength from. I want you there, he said, but only if you feel safe. I'll have additional security, and we can ask them to keep paparazzi at bay. She hesitated, eventually nodding. All right, I'll be there. I want to support you. Their decision meant that for the first time, they'd appear together in a high-profile setting, confirming themselves as a couple expecting a child. The day of the conference arrived. Jared wore a well-tailored suit, the very image of composure. Caitlin's outfit was elegant yet understated, a flowing top in a soft hue designed to hint at her pregnancy without making it the focal point. Tessa stood by for moral support, though she stayed out of the spotlight. As Jared approached the podium, cameras flashed like tiny bursts of lightning. He spoke smoothly about the next wave of AI innovation, weaving in stories of how Brant Tech had grown from a tiny startup to a global powerhouse. He made jokes about working day and night, a subtle wink at his critics who claimed he was distracted. The audience responded with applause, seemingly reassured. But the real moment that captured hearts came later, during the Q&A. A reporter stood up and, instead of asking about code or corporate expansions, said, "We've heard you're about to become a father, Mr. Brant. How do you expect this big life change to impact your leadership here at Brant Tech?" A hush fell over the room. Jared paused, glimpsing Caitlin in the front row. She offered an encouraging nod. He inhaled, smiled, and answered with conviction. I believe becoming a father will make me more passionate about shaping a future that benefits everyone. Because when you start thinking about the next generation, your own child included, you realize technology should serve humanity, not just shareholders. A smattering of applause erupted. Cameras pivoted toward Caitlin, who blushed but returned a calm smile. In that instant, they became more than a sensational rumor. They looked like partners in a new chapter. The press caught that image, Jared looking down at her with warmth, Caitlin meeting his gaze with unwavering support. Within hours, social media was flooded with clips praising Jared's sincerity. A wave of goodwill blossomed. Many commended his emphasis on family values, on building a legacy that would last beyond profit margins. Of course, critics still existed, but for once, the narrative tilting public sentiment was positive, or at least hopeful. They left the conference center arm in arm, Tessa trailing behind with a beaming grin. Outside, cameras still flashed, but the questions hurled at them sounded slightly gentler. Caitlin, how are you feeling? Are you excited, Jared? Any baby names yet? They navigated the sea of reporters, stepping into a waiting car, and for a moment, as the doors shut, they exchanged a look of relief that only two people who've weathered a storm can share. In the quiet of the car, Jared entwined his hand with Caitlin's. I think that went well, he said softly, the corners of his mouth lifting. She nodded. Yeah, I think it did. It was a small triumph, a chance to define their own story rather than let rumor dictate it. The challenges wouldn't vanish overnight. There were still deals to close, potential betrayals in the boardroom, and the uncharted terrain of becoming parents. But they had reclaimed a bit of control. In each other, they found the resolve to face whatever came next. The next morning, golden sunlight poured through the penthouse windows, catching tiny motes of dust in its beams. In the airy living room, Caitlin stood, gently stretching her arms overhead. The quiet hum of the city below always seemed just a little gentler after a successful night's rest. She exhaled, let her shoulders drop, and turned to see Jared emerging from the bedroom, hair still tousled from sleep. His eyes flicked toward her with that soft warmth she was growing addicted to. You're up early, he observed, padding barefoot across the marble floor. Caitlin shrugged, one hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen, still a modest curve, but noticeable enough to remind her daily of the new life growing inside. I can't sleep in like I used to. Plus, I woke up feeling calm. And that's such a rare feeling lately. I wanted to appreciate it. A fleeting smile crossed Jared's features. Enjoy the calm while it lasts, he teased, though there was underlying truth in his words. The day after the tech conference, everything felt oddly balanced. Media outlets were replaying clips of Jared's keynote speech and commending his forward-thinking approach, and they were doing so with surprisingly minimal gossip about his personal life. For once, the world seemed to see him as not just a scandal-laced billionaire, but a visionary who happened to be stepping into fatherhood. Their phones, however, hadn't gone quiet. Jared's new obligations were piling up: sponsor lunches, investor calls, deadlines. He had a flight scheduled for next week to finalize an international distribution deal. Meanwhile, Caitlin's phone buzzed with well-meaning texts from colleagues and family, friends from her hometown who had only just discovered the news. She mostly felt gratitude, but every ring of the phone reminded her that her life was in flux. She wasn't sure if or when she'd return to her hospital job, and the near-constant swirl of publicity still strained her nerves. Any big plans today? Caitlin asked, settling onto the sofa. Jared poured 2 mugs of coffee, his black, hers half decaf. He brought them over, placing one in front of her with a gentle caution. Just a few calls, and I promised to meet with my board again. They want a post-conference rundown. He slid next to her, exhaling. I have a feeling some of them are still on edge, worried we've only won half the battle with the public. Caitlin frowned. Do you think they still doubt your ability to lead the company? He tapped his fingers around the mug's rim. Not all of them, but a handful? Yes. They don't say it aloud, too unprofessional, but I can read it on their faces. The concern is that I might have to divide my focus once the baby arrives. He glanced at her. It's like they forget that people have families every day and still do their jobs. She placed a reassuring hand on his forearm. We'll handle that too. You'll prove it to them with results. Jared returned her confidence with a nod. You always know what to say. They finished their coffees quietly, letting the ambient city noise fill the conversation's gaps. Soon Jared slipped into a more formal suit, exchanging his casual composure for the polished aura of a CEO. Before he left for the office, he pulled Caitlin into a slow, grounding hug, lips brushing her temple in a silent vow of unity. Later that day, in the 40th floor boardroom at Brant Tech, Jared stood at the head of a gleaming mahogany table, the city skyline forming a dramatic backdrop through floor-to-ceiling windows. Around him, half a dozen board members took their seats, flipping through printed reports about the conference's public reception. Maya Ellis was on his left, ever the composed COO, while Wilson Crane quietly scrutinized the room, the legal mind in him always searching for potential pitfalls. Thank you all for coming, Jared began, voice firm and measured. I believe we have promising data from last night's broadcast metrics. Public sentiment for the upcoming AI launch has improved by nearly 15%. Potential buyers and partners have expressed renewed confidence. He paused, flipping to a chart on a digital screen behind him. As you'll see, we're projecting robust pre-sales. A gray-haired board member, Ms. Fletcher, cleared her throat. Mr. Brandt, the speech was admirable. I think all of us can agree you handled it gracefully. Her gaze was cordial but tinged with a wary undercurrent. However, we should address the ongoing question. Has the negative press truly subsided, or are we experiencing a temporary respite? Jared inhaled. I won't deny there's still interest in my personal situation, but the tabloid frenzy has tempered, and we've repositioned public focus on Brant Tech's innovations. The best remedy is continued progress and transparency, letting the new product speak for itself. Across the table, another board member, an older man named Edmund Cross, interjected in a slow, measured tone, Yes, but we've all seen these fleeting surges of positivity before. One slip-up, one rumor, and we're back to square one. Are you prepared to handle that if it comes? Maya glanced at Jared, her expression suggesting she was ready to step in. But Jared lifted a hand slightly, signaling he had this. Edmund, he said calmly, I understand your concern, but this company isn't built on the fragility of public whim. We have a strong foundation, grounded in real technology that solves real problems. That's what I intend to keep emphasizing. A hush settled. Ms. Fletcher exchanged a look with Edmund. Wilson Crane broke the silence by pushing a typed document forward. We've drafted a revised statement of commitment regarding the product release timeline. It omits any personal references. It's strictly an affirmation of your dedication to the final product milestones, the key deliverables, and so on. Jared eyed the document. He sensed what it meant. The board needed reassurance that no paternal distractions, or anything else, would derail the meticulously planned schedule. Part of him bristled at the notion, but after the tension of the last few weeks, it seemed a fair enough compromise. I'll sign it, he said quietly, picking up a pen, on the condition that if we meet the metrics, if everything proceeds on track, we focus on the business itself, not on my private life. Maya offered a tiny approving smile. Several board members nodded, satisfied by this arrangement. Jared penned his signature with a steady hand. As the paper slid back across the table, the weight in the air lifted, at least for the moment. In the afternoon, Caitlin found herself alone in the penthouse again. Tessa had returned to her own hotel room to handle a work call, leaving Caitlin in a place that still felt surreal at times. She wandered through the spacious rooms, fingers grazing along polished surfaces, mind drifting between excitement for the baby and uncertainty about the future. She passed one of Jared's private offices, an unassuming door she hadn't ventured through often. Curiosity tugged at her. She opened it gently, discovering a smaller, more personal workspace than the imposing main office he used for video calls. It was adorned with shelves of books about coding, scattered photographs from early hackathon days, and an old trophy that read, "Best Undergraduate Tech Innovator." A faint grin touched her lips. Glimpses of the younger, perhaps more idealistic Jard. On the desk, a silver-framed picture caught her attention. She picked it up carefully. It showed Jard around age 17, standing next to a woman and man whose warm expressions almost matched his. His parents, Caitlin realized. The father was tall, with the same slight tilt at the corner of his grin that Jard often had. The mother's eyes glowed with the same curiosity Caitlin saw in Jard whenever he explored new ideas. He rarely talked about them, except for brief mentions of losing them at a young age. Car accident, she recalled. Her chest tightened. Despite the tragedies and challenges that shaped his life, he'd grown into someone compassionate enough to let her in. In that moment, Caitlin felt an urge to promise the memory in this photo that she would do everything she could to ensure Jared's future family felt complete and safe. She set the frame down gently. So many swirling thoughts about moving forward in this relationship, about how to raise a child with a man whose world was constantly under scrutiny. She hadn't planned on motherhood quite this soon. She had always imagined waiting until she was more settled, but maybe life rarely followed a neat plan. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She assumed it was Tessa or Jared, but the caller ID displayed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered hesitantly. A moment of silence. Then a gravelly voice spoke, low and strangely urgent. "Ms. Willow, I presume." She felt a prickle of discomfort. "Yes. Who is this?" "That's not important. I'm calling because I have information regarding someone in Brant Tech who's been feeding personal information to the media. Possibly about you. Possibly about Mr. Brant." Caitlin's pulse quickened. "What? Who?" A pause crackled on the line. "I can't reveal everything yet. But you need to know. Not everyone on the board is on Jared's side. Watch your back." The call cut off abruptly, leaving Caitlin with the phone pressed to her ear, her heart hammering. She stared at the phone, trying to steady her breathing. Could this be a prank? She recalled the barrage of rumors, the suspiciously specific tidbits that ended up in tabloids. Had someone inside Jared's circle orchestrated them to erode public trust? The idea unsettled her profoundly. Jared had recently signed that reassurance document. Could there be a more sinister element aiming to sabotage him from within? Her thoughts spun, uncertain whether to immediately share the call with Jared or gather more proof first. The memory of the voice lingered, unsettling. She glanced around the room as if the walls might have ears. Treading carefully, she stepped back into the main living space and sank onto the couch, phone in hand. A swirl of emotions surfaced. Anger at the notion that someone close to Jared would betray him, fear for how this could intensify the challenges they already faced, and a fierce protectiveness. She would not let anyone use her or her child as a pawn. When Jared came home that evening, Caitlin was still on the couch, lost in thought. He set his briefcase aside, regarding her worried expression. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, then recounted the mysterious call. His eyes darkened with a mix of shock and fury. "Did the caller give a name?" he asked, voice tense. She shook her head. "They only said someone on the board might be leaking personal details, that we should be careful." He went silent, pacing near the panoramic window. "It's not impossible. The board's grown a lot. Some members joined mainly for financial leverage. And the tabloids got details no outsider should have. Caitlin rose, touching his shoulder. What do we do? He clenched his jaw, scanning the city skyline as if it might hold answers. We keep our guard up. I'll have Wilson discreetly investigate any anomalies in communications or suspicious activity. And we don't breathe a word of this to the rest of the board until we have proof. If someone's intentionally destabilizing the company, we have to expose them carefully. Her gaze flicked to the silver-framed photo she'd found earlier. She thought of the heartbreak Jard had already endured, of the vulnerability he'd shown by letting her into his life. This betrayal, if confirmed, would be another wound. Stepping closer, she wrapped her arms around him from behind, her chin on his shoulder. I'm here, she said softly. We'll face it together. His hand found hers, the tension in his posture easing slightly. Together, he echoed. In that word, a fragile alliance formed, a promise to defend themselves and their future family against shadows and hidden agendas. Just then, her phone buzzed again with a message from Tessa, something about dinner plans. The real world kept spinning, reminding them that life went on outside this swirl of corporate espionage and personal anxieties. Jard turned to face Caitlin, brushing a lock of her hair aside. We can't let fear define us, he said. We'll fight back, but we'll also keep living, keep preparing for the baby. That's where our energy should be. Caitlin nodded, letting her head rest against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, a steady, reassuring drum. Outside, twilight draped the city in a soft glow. It was a fleeting moment of peace amid the storm clouds gathering overhead. Tomorrow, they would gather themselves, investigate leads, make strategic moves. Tonight, at least, they had each other, and the conviction that no one, inside or outside the company, would tear them apart. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains as Caitlin roused from a shallow sleep. She felt Jared stir behind her, his arm draped protectively around her waist. For a second, she let her eyes close again, savoring the warmth of his presence. But just like the tension in the air, her mind stirred with a relentless reminder. A caller had warned of a traitor on the board. Someone in Jared's trusted circle might be feeding information to the media, or worse. She forced herself upright. Jard blinked awake, a crease marking his forehead. You okay? He murmured, voice rough from sleep. She nodded, summoning a reassuring smile. I'm fine, just thinking. His gaze flickered, and she knew they were both dwelling on the same worry. There'd be no simple return to quiet domesticity until they uncovered who was behind the leaks. They dressed in subdued silence. Caitlin chose a light blouse and jeans that made room for her gentle baby bump, while Jard opted for a crisp black shirt and tailored pants. He paused once, placing a warm hand over her abdomen. In the stillness, they both felt a subtle flutter, like a tiny nudge from the new life forming within. Caitlin's eyes glistened with a hopeful brightness. At least there was something good at the center of all this turmoil. Over breakfast, Jared sipped a single espresso and updated Caitlin on his plan. I called Wilson last night. We're going to run a quiet internal audit. Communications, finance records, anything that might show suspicious patterns. Wilson has a tech-savvy investigator friend who can comb through digital footprints without drawing attention. He set the tiny cup down, exhaling. It's possible we might find nothing. But if someone has been funneling details to the press, I want to see a clue, a payment, an unusual contact. Caitlin swallowed a bite of toast, tension coiling in her chest. And if you do find someone, what then? A flicker of anger passed behind Jared's eyes. I confront them, and if they've broken legal grounds, if they've tried sabotaging the company, we involve the authorities. She cringed inwardly at how messy this could become. A public scandal about corporate betrayal would only fuel the tabloids more, but she also recognized Jared's need to protect his company, his life's work, and to shield their relationship from further harm. I trust you, she said softly. He leaned over to press a brief kiss to her temple. "We'll get through this," he promised. Later that morning, while Jared headed to the Brant Tech offices, Caitlin decided to reacquaint herself with a sense of normalcy. Tessa had texted, offering to meet for lunch, and Caitlin thought it might be a good distraction. They chose a cozy bistro not too far from the penthouse, one that served healthy sandwiches and fresh squeezed juices, perfect for an expecting mother who desperately needed something sweet and bright to offset the stress. As soon as Caitlin arrived, the aroma of baked bread and espresso filled her senses. Tessa waved from a table by the window, her grin as warm as always. She stood up to hug Caitlin, eyes flicking curiously at her slightly expanded belly. "You're glowing," Tessa teased, sliding the menu across the table. Caitlin laughed, relieved to be with someone who cared about her for reasons beyond business or headlines. "I'm not sure if it's a glow or just nerves," she admitted, picking up the menu. "Life is complicated." "I figured," Tessa said, leaning forward. "You've been juggling so much, and your phone message last night sounded tense. Everything okay with Jared?" Caitlin glanced around, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. The bistro was quiet, with only a few patrons lost in their own conversations. "We got a call. Someone claims that a board member is leaking private details to the media. We don't know who to trust. Jared's investigating, but it's..." She sighed. "It's tense, and I feel helpless. I wish there was more I could do to help him." Tessa reached across the table, covering Caitlin's hand with hers. "I'm sure just being there for him matters more than you realize. He probably needs someone who believes in him unconditionally." Caitlin felt tears prick her eyes, a wave of gratitude for Tessa's unwavering friendship. "Thanks. Sometimes I wonder if I'm in over my head. I went from being this anonymous nurse to living in the center of a corporate storm and tabloid frenzy." Tessa's brows furrowed sympathetically. "Would you go back to the hospital if you could, once the tabloids calm down?" A thoughtful pause. "I miss it," Caitlin admitted. "I love my patients, but I don't know if that's realistic now. The paparazzi haven't vanished, and once I'm visibly pregnant, I don't want to cause a distraction in the ward." She brushed her thumb against the rim of her water glass. "Jared says he supports whatever I choose, but I still haven't figured out how to be both a nurse and, well, the mother of a billionaire's child. It's surreal." Tessa nodded, understanding. "You'll find the balance. Just give it time." They ordered their meals, a turkey and avocado sandwich for Caitlin, a veggie wrap for Tessa. Soon they chatted about baby names and prenatal yoga classes, the conversation brightening. For one precious hour, Caitlin felt almost normal, like any expectant mom discussing hopes and dreams with her best friend. But reality intruded after they finished lunch. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, a camera flash erupted from across the street. A paparazzo had spotted them. Lens zoomed in. Tessa instinctively pressed closer to Caitlin, annoyance flashing in her eyes. "Get lost!" she yelled, but the photographer just snapped more pictures before darting away into the crowd. Caitlin's nerves twisted. One careless photo and tomorrow's gossip site might spin a headline, "Mom-to-be shops while scandal brews at Brant Tech." She forced a steadying breath and reminded herself that no matter how invasive it felt, this was their new normal. "Let's get out of here," she said quietly. Tessa wrapped an arm around her, guiding her through the bustling sidewalk. Meanwhile, at Brant Tech's main building, Jared locked himself in his office with Wilson Crane and a stocky man named Derek Hall, a private investigator with an air of calm efficiency. "This is the overview of phone logs and email audits," Derek explained, sliding a sheaf of papers across Jared's desk. "I ran a preliminary pass last night. I noticed some unusual message spikes from 2 board members. One is Ms. Fletcher. She's in contact with a few journalists, but they seem to be standard inquiries about business coverage. Nothing overtly suspicious. The second is Edmund Cross." Jared tapped the page with Edmund's name, remembering the older man's guarded expression during the last board meeting. Cross. I know he's historically conservative when it comes to risk. He was the first to raise doubts about me after the accident. He glanced at Wilson. What do we have on him? Wilson flipped through a folder. He's an old money investor, holds a respectable share in Brant Tech, but has always pushed for more traditional expansions. Lately, he's rumored to have ties to a competitor looking to develop parallel AI software. The rumor is unconfirmed. Jared's jaw tightened. So he might be feeding negative press or inside data to undermine my leadership and pave the way for a competitor. Derek nodded. Could be. I also flagged some large, unexplained transactions in one of Cross's shell accounts. Nothing illegal at first glance, but suspicious enough to warrant further scrutiny. A heavy silence hung in the room. Jared closed the folder, resisting the impulse to toss it across the desk in frustration. Do we have enough to confront him? Not yet, Derek said. But we're close. If we dig a little deeper, maybe track that money flow, we might find conclusive evidence. The key is subtlety. If Cross realizes he's being watched, he'll bury the paper trail. Jared leaned back in his chair, mind racing. I'll keep acting normal around him. We'll continue these audits quietly. If he's behind this, I want to catch him red-handed. Wilson watched him carefully. Be careful, Jared. We don't want to push him into a corner prematurely. I know, Jared replied, but we can't let him keep poisoning the well. If he's working with an outside competitor or fueling tabloids for his own agenda, he risks everything we've built. Hours later, Jared returned home, mind buzzing with the revelation about Edmund Cross. He found Caitlin curled up in an armchair by the window, reading a baby development book. At the sound of his footsteps, she looked up, concern shadowing her gaze. You okay? Jared let out a terse breath. Possibly found a suspect, he said, sinking onto the couch. He recapped the investigators' findings, concluding with Cross's suspicious transactions. Caitlin listened intently, face clouding. So, he could be the one who called the media about me? She asked quietly. Could be. Or it might be more sinister than that. He might be feeding them half-truths, drumming up pressure on me so I'll relinquish control of the launch. Either way, I have to see how far this goes. He studied her eyes, noticing fresh lines of stress. Her day hadn't been easy either. How about you? Everything all right? She hesitated, recalling the paparazzo earlier, but decided not to add to his burdens. I had lunch with Tessa, which was nice. Got harassed by a photographer, less nice. But I'm okay. She managed a faint smile. Focus on your investigation. I just want you to be safe and not let this overshadow the good things in our lives. Relieved that she seemed in stable spirits, Jared nodded. I appreciate that. He glanced at the city lights emerging in the windows. Sometimes I wish we could just run away from all of this, find a quiet town where no one cares about brand recognition or corporate shares. Caitlin gently placed her hand atop his. I'd follow you to that town. But running won't solve the sabotage within your board. You've worked too hard to let someone drive you out. His eyes softened. You're right. We stand our ground. He pulled her into a gentle embrace. Outside, the sky had turned to a dusky purple, city lights glowing like distant fireflies. In that moment, they found solace in each other's closeness, a refuge from the building storm. They ordered dinner in, simple pasta and salad from a local Italian place, and ate quietly. Between bites, they shared small smiles, wordlessly reminding themselves that underneath all the pressure, they were two soon-to-be parents forging a family. When the meal ended, Caitlin nestled against Jared's side on the couch. He scrolled through some business emails, but his arm remained snug around her shoulders. A sudden beep from her phone interrupted the hush. Caitlin picked it up, reading a new text from the same unknown number that had called before. He's meeting them tonight, rival firm, 9 p.m. City Club. Her pulse raced. Jared noticed her tightening grip on the phone. "What is it?" he asked quickly. She showed him the text. His face darkened. "City Club. That's an upscale lounge downtown. If Cross is meeting a rival firm, we might catch him in the act." Caitlin's voice trembled with a mix of alarm and intrigue. "Should you go confront him? Or send Derek?" Jared stared at the phone, mind churning. Derek might be better at being inconspicuous, but if Cross sees Derek, he could clam up. He glanced at her. "If I show up, it might force his hand, but it also risks a scene. This is dangerous territory." She placed a trembling hand on his. "You do what you have to. Just promise me you'll be careful." He nodded firmly. "I promise." Swallowing hard, Jared realized he was about to step further into the shadows behind his corporate success. There was no turning back. Not if he wanted to protect everything he cherished. Caitlin's eyes shone with concern as she squeezed his hand. Their gazes locked in an unspoken vow to weather the outcome. Soon enough, Jared would leave for City Club in the hope of unmasking a traitor and reclaiming control over his world. The tension that hung in the penthouse felt almost tangible, an invisible cord winding ever tighter. For now, all they could do was brace themselves for the answers they might find. Because once the truth emerged, there would be no way to bury it again. And the consequences, both for the company and their future family, might be more far-reaching than either of them imagined. Smoke-like clouds had rolled into the city by the time Jared's car pulled up outside the upscale City Club. The building stood tall and imposing, gleaming windows wrapped in neon lines that hinted at the lounge's polished exclusivity. The valet, clad in a crisp black uniform, opened the door for him with a polite nod. Jared stepped out, adjusting the lapels of his tailored jacket while his driver discreetly blended into the line of parked luxury vehicles. He wasn't used to sneaking around his own city. Usually, Jared Brandt's arrivals were heralded by press releases and camera flashes, but tonight, the objective was stealth. He'd told only a select handful of people, Caitlin and Wilson, about this plan to see if Edmund Cross might indeed be meeting with a rival firm. He couldn't afford to tip Cross off. As he entered, the club's hostess recognized him immediately. He was, after all, one of the more talked-about figures in town. Yet she kept her composure, gesturing courteously. "Welcome, Mr. Brandt." Her voice was low and polished, a reflection of the hush that pervaded the dimly lit lounge. "Will you need a private table?" Jared shook his head. "I'm meeting someone," he replied, keeping his voice level. "Just let me know if you've seen a Mr. Cross check in tonight." Her cool expression didn't falter. "We don't disclose our guests' arrivals, sir, but if you'd like to wait at the bar, I can inform you if Mr. Cross inquires." He nodded, reading the subtext. Discretion was part of this place's allure. Powerful people came here to do business away from prying eyes. That meant Jared would have to remain patient. Sliding onto a velvet-cushioned bar stool, he signaled for a bottle of still water. Music thrummed softly, a moody jazz track drifting across the polished floors. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over dark wood tables, each hosting its own private conversation. Peering around, he spotted a few familiar faces from the city's elite circles. Executives, philanthropists, even a minor celebrity. But not Edmund Cross. Not yet. Jared sipped his water, posture tense, ignoring the flickers of recognition from across the room. For what felt like half an hour, he feigned casual interest in the lounge's ambiance, scanning for Cross's entrance. Suddenly, the door at the far end of the lounge swung open. Jared shifted, heartbeat jumping when he saw Edmund's silver hair as the man strode in, a crisp navy suit hugging his wiry frame. And just behind him, two men Jared didn't recognize, exuding a certain formality. Possibly the rival firm's representatives, he guessed. They spoke with Edmund in low tones, collectively heading toward a secluded booth near the back. Jared slipped off the bar stool, trying to stay out of their direct line of sight, and moved between tables with quiet purpose. He was relieved to find a tall ficus plant that half-shielded a corner booth from view. From there, he had a partial vantage point of Edmund and his companions, though the angles were tricky. He ordered a coffee from a passing waitress, wanting a plausible reason to stay. Leaning back, Jared focused on reading their body language. Edmund looked subdued, arms folded. Occasionally, he'd tap a phone screen, showing something to the men beside him. Jared couldn't make out the words, but the tension in the group was palpable. The older man's jaw flexed as he spoke, a sign he was either pushing an agenda or feeling cornered. Then one of the strangers slid a folder across the table. Edmund opened it, scanned a page, then nodded curtly. Suddenly, Jared's phone vibrated in his pocket. The sharp buzz made him flinch. He pulled it out discreetly, half expecting a text from Wilson or Caitlin. Instead, it was an unknown number, likely the same caller who'd tipped them off. Unsure whether to answer in the open, Jared declined. A second later, a text arrived. "They're finalizing the arrangement. Something about a stake in a spin-off. Hurry." His pulse kicked up, so the tipster was possibly inside the lounge as well, or had ears on the conversation. He was running out of time to gather proof. But how? He glanced around, noticing the lounge's staff in black uniforms drifting between tables. If he confronted Edmund now without evidence, Edmund would just deny it. Jared considered filming them, but from his angle it would be obvious, and he doubted any audio would be clear enough to be useful. Before he could decide, he spotted an opportunity. As one of Edmund's companions got up, presumably to use the restroom, he left the folder behind on the table. Edmund and the other man kept talking. This might be his only window to see what was inside, but it also meant risking crossing the room in full view. Jared inhaled. He had to at least try. Easing out of the booth, he slid around the perimeter of the lounge, hoping to stay within pockets of shadow. A waiter with a tray of cocktails stepped in front of him for a moment, inadvertently providing cover. In a matter of seconds, Jared neared their booth from behind. Edmund's voice carried faintly. "Brant Tech's AI is set for release soon. If I can ensure the timeline falters, the market will be more receptive to your product. This is about synergy, gentlemen. We just need a bit of strategic sabotage." Jared's stomach lurched. So it was real. Edmund was orchestrating sabotage. The older man continued, "I don't care if the press focuses on that nurse or on Jared himself, as long as public confidence wanes. Then we launch our alternative. Our terms for the spin-off." The returning companion's footsteps cut Edmund short. Jared ducked behind a column, heart pounding. He had heard enough to confirm Edmund's betrayal. He was fueling the tabloids intentionally. This wasn't just about personal vendettas. It was a calculated attempt to undermine Brant Tech's success. But how to get concrete evidence? Adrenaline coursed through Jared, pushing him to do something risky. Once Edmund and the men left the lounge, the chance might vanish. He spied a small empty table near them. If he placed his phone there, set to record, maybe he could capture the conversation. In the hush of the lounge, his phone's microphone might pick up enough. He took a shaky breath, stepping carefully into the open. Under the cover of the low lighting, he crept toward that table, pulling his phone from his jacket. With a few quick taps, he activated a voice memo app, set the volume to silent, and positioned the phone so the microphone faced the booth. As if on cue, Edmund's conversation grew more animated. "We can finalize everything next week," he said. "But I need your reassurance that you'll keep my involvement discreet until the meltdown at Brant Tech is irreversible. No one can suspect me, or else I lose my seat on the board." The other man answered in a gravelly tone, "Agreed. Our firm will claim any new innovations. Once Jared Brant's credibility crumbles, we'll overshadow him. Then you'll get your stake, plus the influence you've wanted." Jared's chest tightened. This was more than sabotage. It was an orchestrated corporate theft. He stepped back, merging into the lounge's subdued background. He needed at least another minute of their dialogue for a solid audio capture, If he left now, he might blow his cover. But then, a tall woman in a sleek red dress rose from a nearby table, intending to step toward the bar. She glanced at the phone on the corner of the small table with curiosity. Jared's breath caught. If she picked up the phone or alerted staff, all would be lost. Thinking quickly, he moved forward with a confident stride, as if the phone were intentionally left for him. Scooping it up, he smiled politely, giving no hint that it was recording. "Thanks for looking after this," he muttered to the woman, who simply nodded and moved on, uninterested. No more time. He had to get out. Slipping the phone into his pocket, Jared made a wide circle around the lounge, praying the app had recorded enough. Edmund and his cohorts didn't seem to notice him, consumed by their conspiratorial talk. The hostess watched him with mild curiosity as he left, but he forced a calm smile, offering a small tip, then stepped into the cool night air. His lungs felt like they could finally expand again. Outside, he gestured for the valet, who swiftly returned with his car. Settling into the back seat, Jared closed the door, heart thumping. "Drive," he told the chauffeur, voice tight. Only once they merged into the flow of traffic did he exhale, pulling out the phone to check the recording. The voice memo indicated it had captured nearly 2 minutes of audio, hopefully enough to catch the damning phrases. He wouldn't listen to it now. It was too risky in a moving car. But his chest swirled with hope and dread in equal measure. Edmund Cross was actively plotting against him. The personal attacks on Caitlin? Likely just one piece of a bigger plan to topple Brant Tech's AI launch. If the sabotage continued unimpeded, Jared's entire empire and the livelihood of thousands of employees could be at stake. But with this audio, maybe they had a fighting chance to expose the betrayal publicly and legally. Caitlin's face flashed through Jared's mind, her unwavering support, the worry she carried. He thought of the baby they were expecting, the life that deserved a stable future. Tonight had revealed an ugly truth, but it also presented the possibility of dismantling the threat from within. The real question was, how to wield this evidence without letting it backfire? By the time the car neared his penthouse, the city lights flashed and pulsed in a brilliant mosaic. Jared's phone buzzed again, Caitlin calling. He answered, heart warming at the sound of her voice. "Are you okay?" she asked, sounding breathless with concern. "I've been worried. I'm on my way back," he said gently. "I have something. Audio that might prove everything." A pause. "That's good, I guess. But please be safe. We'll figure out the next move once you're here." He swallowed, relieved by her calmness. "I'll be there soon." Within minutes, they stood face to face in the penthouse living room. Caitlin's eyes darted over him, checking for any sign of distress. Jared set his jacket aside, stepping closer. "I recorded him, Caitlin," he said quietly, "talking about sabotaging the company, mentioning me specifically. They want me out so a rival can launch something similar?" Her hand flew to her mouth. "So it's not just personal attacks, it's a takeover scheme." He nodded, pulling the phone from his pocket. "I haven't listened yet, but if it's as incriminating as it sounded, we can go to the board, even the authorities." Caitlin gently touched his arm, her voice soft but resolute. "And you'll handle it carefully, right? I don't want to see you dragged into a corporate war that gets uglier than it already is." Jared exhaled, the tension in his shoulders flaring again. "We have no choice, but yes, we'll be careful. We'll let Wilson handle the legal approach. Let Derek gather more evidence if needed. If we do this right, we expose Edmund as the source of the leaks, maybe charge him with conspiracy or some kind of fraud. He loses his seat, the tabloids lose their informant." He braced himself, remembering Edmund's words at the lounge. "But I suspect Edmund won't go down without a fight. We need to be ready for retaliation." Caitlin's gaze flicked to the slight curve of her belly, an unspoken fear in her eyes. Then she met Jared's stare, determination flickering. "We will be," she said simply. He nodded. They drew closer, leaning into the shared warmth of an embrace. Outside, the city loomed, bright, noisy, indifferent. For a moment, the swirl of corporate sabotage and personal betrayal quieted in the hush of their embrace. In that fleeting stillness, they both held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth would set them free from the shadows that haunted their every step. With the damning audio in hand, Jared and Caitlin understood that the battle was far from over. But they had the one weapon that might finally turn the tide. Tomorrow they'd begin the process of bringing Edmund's treachery to light, forging ahead with a fierce resolve. After all, their future, and the future of the life they were building, depended on it. The first rays of dawn found Jared pacing across the penthouse living room, phone in hand. The plush carpet muffled his brisk steps, yet the tension radiating off him was palpable. On the screen, he had just finished replaying the audio snippet he'd recorded at the City Club. Even with some background lounge noises, Edmund Cross's voice sounded unmistakably clear, discussing sabotage, a competitor, and melting down Brant Tech's credibility. It was damning enough to make Jared's stomach lurch every time he heard it. Caitlin, still in her robe, leaned against the couch, watching his agitated movements. Her eyes were heavy with the weight of the new revelations, though she tried to keep her expression calm. In her hands, she held a mug of herbal tea, the steam ghosting around her face. "Are you sure you want to keep listening?" she asked gently, wincing at the next snippet of Edmund's voice. "We already know it's him." Jared paused mid-pace, pressing pause. "I just want to be sure it's enough. The sound quality, it's not perfect. Will it hold up if we bring it to the rest of the board, or worse, if legal action is needed?" His question hung in the air, thick with worry. Caitlin set her mug down and moved to him, placing a hand on his arm. "Wilson is the best legal mind you know. Let him decide. You risking more by listening on loop isn't going to change what we have." She searched his gaze. "Besides, the more you hear it, the more it hurts. You trusted him." Jared sighed, covering her hand with his own. "I know. He was always cautious, but I never thought sabotage." His voice dropped, raw with disappointment. "I guess I believed even the most conservative board members cared about the company's success, not that they'd conspire with a rival to make us fail." Caitlin's fingers curled around his. "You have proof now. That's the important part. Let Wilson figure out the next steps. In the meantime, promise me you'll look after yourself. Stress can't be good for either of us." He softened at the reminder that they shared each burden now. Slipping his phone into his pocket, Jared nodded. "All right, let's call Wilson." They convened a quick video call with Wilson Crane. He listened in silence as Jared played the incriminating clip. The attorney's face, usually composed and unflappable, grew stern. "It's definitely Cross," Wilson said finally, voice low. "And if we can identify those other voices as staff from a competitor, it's bigger than just a leak. It's an actual conspiracy to undermine Brant Tech, potentially with inside trading or intellectual property theft in the works. That's a serious offense." Jared exhaled, relief laced with anxiety. "So the audio is enough to start an internal investigation, maybe even talk to the authorities?" Wilson gave a measured nod. "Yes, but we should be strategic. If we go straight to the board with just an audio file, Cross could claim it's fabricated or argue it was recorded illegally. We need to pair it with more evidence. Derek's investigation into Cross's financial dealings could be the puzzle piece that ties everything together." Caitlin, who stood just behind Jared, spoke up. "In the meeting at City Club, they mentioned finalizing something next week. We might have time to catch them red-handed with more documentation." Wilson's eyebrows lifted. "That's a good idea. If we gather clear evidence, financial logs, maybe Cross's communications, and combine it with the audio, the board will have no choice but to acknowledge the betrayal, and if necessary, we can forward it to law enforcement." Jared took a stabilizing breath. So we continue the quiet investigation. Meanwhile, we act as if we suspect nothing. Precisely, Wilson agreed. I'll coordinate with Derek. We'll cross-reference the timeline with that mention of next week's finalization. That might be the day they sign or transfer something legally binding. If we can intercept it or get a copy, it'll be the nail in Cross's coffin. The call ended. A tension-laden resolve filled the penthouse. Caitlin slipped her arms around Jared's waist from behind, resting her head between his shoulder blades. "I'm proud of you, you know," she murmured. "You're fighting for your company's integrity." He turned, carefully wrapping her in his arms. "I'm fighting for us too." They stood there for a moment, hearts beating in quiet unison. Then Jared's phone buzzed again, his administrative assistant reminding him of an executive team check-in at the office. The day's routine marched on, unyielding. He sighed. "It never stops, does it?" Caitlin managed a gentle smile. "Go handle your business. I'll be here, holding down the fort." He kissed her forehead, trying to imprint every bit of warmth before stepping away into the swirl of corporate drama once more. By mid-morning, Jared found himself in the Brant Tech conference room, presenting updates on the final AI product launch to department heads. Maya Ellis, the COO, led discussions on marketing campaigns, while engineers reported the last-minute bugs they were squashing. Despite the simmering threat of Cross's sabotage, the team's enthusiasm remained high. Their research breakthroughs were groundbreaking, and the software's potential was enormous. Every so often, Jared caught Maya's watchful gaze. She gave him small nods of encouragement, possibly sensing the underlying strain. Once the meeting ended, she lingered. "Jared, I know something else is going on. You're more tense than usual. Is everything okay with you?" "And Caitlin?" she asked gently. He weighed how much to share. Maya had been a loyal ally, but he also knew the fewer people who knew about Cross's betrayal, the better. "Caitlin and I are fine," he said truthfully. "Just typical pre-launch nerves. And, I'm about to be a father," he added with a faint smile, hoping to redirect suspicion. Maya studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Well, if you need anything, let me know. We're all rooting for this launch to be a success." As she left, Jared's gaze trailed after her, wondering who else on the executive team might suspect trouble. He forced himself to keep calm. Only a handful more days until Derek and Wilson hopefully uncovered Cross's transaction details. That afternoon, Caitlin ventured out for a routine prenatal checkup at her obstetrician's office. Given the paparazzi's unpredictable presence, she traveled with a company car and a discreet driver. Fortunately, the clinic was tucked away in a quieter part of town, and no photographers lurked around. Inside, the calm green walls and gentle hum of the HVAC system provided a soothing contrast to the intensity of the penthouse. Dr. Nguyen greeted her with a warm smile. "How are we feeling today, Caitlin?" she asked, guiding her into an exam room. "Any morning sickness? Fatigue?" "Some fatigue, but overall I'm all right," Caitlin responded, settling onto the exam table. Her gaze flicked to the ultrasound machine, a mixture of nerves and anticipation fluttering in her chest. "You seem a bit stressed," Dr. Nguyen observed kindly, fitting blood pressure straps around her arm. "Everything okay outside of pregnancy?" Caitlin offered a weary smile. "Just complicated circumstances, a lot of media attention." She hesitated. "And corporate drama, I guess." Dr. Nguyen nodded, pressing a stethoscope gently over Caitlin's belly. "That's normal in these high-profile situations, but remember, your mental health matters here. The baby feels your stress." Caitlin exhaled, letting the doctor's words sink in. "I'm trying. Sometimes it feels like everything is happening at once." The doctor listened patiently, then turned on the ultrasound machine. The gentle whir filled the silence. Soon the monitor lit up, revealing the faint shape of the growing baby. Caitlin felt her heart swell. Each time she saw that little figure, moving, fluttering, it anchored her in a hope that overshadowed the chaos. Everything looks good, Dr. Nguyen assured, pointing out tiny limbs. Development is on track. Keep up with your prenatal vitamins, get plenty of rest, and do your best to reduce stress. Caitlin nodded, tears prickling her eyes as she watched the rhythmic flicker of the fetal heartbeat. The clarity of that sound was like a promise. No matter what conspiracies loomed around them, this small life was blossoming. Back at the penthouse by late afternoon, Caitlin realized just how drained she felt. The tension, the indefinite waiting for a resolution, and the maternal sense of protectiveness weighed heavily. She made herself a light snack and sank onto the sofa, checking her phone for any messages from Jared or Tessa. To her surprise, a new text from Tessa appeared. "Hey, everything all right? Heard from a coworker that there's more talk in the tabloids about you guys. Something about shocking evidence? Let me know if you need me." Caitlin's stomach twisted. Another rumor swirling around, probably seeded by Cross or his allies. She typed back, "Not sure what it is. Jared's working on something big. I'll keep you posted." With a resigned sigh, she flicked through the trending news on social media. Sure enough, a few gossip sites teased unconfirmed revelations about Jared's personal or professional controversies. Nothing specific yet. She prayed it wouldn't escalate into another invasive wave. An hour later, the door unlocked and Jared walked in, shoulders tense, phone glued to his ear. "Yes, Wilson, I understand," he was saying as he kicked off his shoes. "All right, keep me posted." He ended the call with a grim look on his face. Caitlin rose from the couch, heartbeat fluttering. "Something happened?" He nodded slowly. Cross might be making a move sooner than expected. Derek found unusual banking activity from Cross's shell account, possibly transferring funds to a third party. They're trying to trace it right now. Her pulse hammered. "So the finalization he mentioned, it might be happening sooner?" "Likely," Jared confirmed. He raked a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "If he signs deals or transfers ownership in hush-hush ways, we'll lose the chance to prove everything. We need a stronger intercept, some direct evidence of the sabotage. The audio alone might not cut it if Cross denies or claims it's doctored." Caitlin felt a wave of anxiety. "Then we have to catch him in the act, right? Something tangible." "Exactly. Wilson and Derek are stepping up surveillance. They're also going to see if they can glean any data from Cross's digital footprint at Brant Tech, like logins or records that match these suspicious transactions." He sighed, walking over to her, expression softening as soon as he saw her concern. "I'm sorry. I hate putting you through all this." She shook her head. "We're in this together. Just tell me how I can help." He took her hands, pressing them gently between his. "Keep doing what you're doing, taking care of yourself and our baby. I can't afford to lose sight of what really matters in all of this." A lump rose in her throat. "You won't. We won't." He pulled her into a tender embrace. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyscrapers, casting long, deep shadows across the floor. For a moment, the hush felt peaceful, an acknowledgement of the intimate bond they shared beneath the swirl of corporate intrigue. But the hush didn't last. A few hours later, Jared's phone lit up again. This time it was Derek's number. Jared put it on speaker so Caitlin could hear. "Jared," Derek said quickly, "I'm tailing Cross right now. He just left the building in a hurry, didn't use his usual driver. He's heading downtown near the legal district." Jared's jaw tightened. "You think he's finalizing the sabotage agreement with the competitor's lawyers or something?" "Potentially. I also saw Ms. Fletcher in her car trailing him. Might be a coincidence, or maybe she's involved. Hard to tell yet. I'm going to follow them. I'll keep you updated." The call ended. Caitlin's eyes widened. "Fletcher too? I thought she was harmless." Jared rubbed his temple, tension radiating. "I did too. But maybe Cross convinced her to side with him, or she's investigating him on her own. We don't know." They exchanged a worried glance. The quiet, unexpected alliance of board members or the possibility of more betrayal weighed on them both. If this escalated, it could tear the entire board apart. "Do you want to go there?" Caitlin asked softly. "To see for yourself?" He considered it, 1,000 scenarios running through his mind. Finally, he shook his head. "Derek has it covered. If I show up, Cross might panic and destroy any documents he has. I'll let Derek gather evidence, then we move carefully." Caitlin nodded, though the thought of sitting idle gnawed at her. She recognized the wisdom in Jared's caution. They'd come too far to risk exposing themselves prematurely. With difficulty, they settled into another tense wait, checking the clock every few minutes, adrenaline coursing but with nowhere to go. When Derek finally texted, it was past 10 at night. They entered a private office, lights still on. Ms. Fletcher waited in her car. Cross emerged alone, slipped out a side exit. "I'm trying to see if I can get the license plates or a photo. Hang tight." Jared read it aloud to Caitlin, who bit her lip. "At least he didn't see Derek. Maybe we'll finally have the link we need." "Let's hope," Jared muttered. "This has to end soon." They both knew that with each passing hour, Cross tightened his scheme. One misstep, and Brant Tech could suffer irreparable damage, or the story could shift in the press, painting Jared as incompetent. And overshadowing all that was the fragile hush of their private life, the unborn child that had become a symbol of hope in an increasingly tumultuous world. But for now, they held on to the faint glimmer that Derek's tenacity, plus the audio and financial records, would form the net to snare Cross once and for all. As they turned in for the night, Jared and Caitlin clung to each other beneath the covers, hearts pounding in unison. Outside, the city lights glowed, ignorant of the personal war raging in high-rise offices and behind penthouse doors. Tomorrow they would know more. Tomorrow they might finally tip the scales in their favor or face the reckoning of Cross's next move. And as each second ticked by, Caitlin silently promised the tiny life inside her that they would keep fighting, no matter what, to forge a safer, brighter path forward. Dawn arrived, but a sense of uncertainty still cloaked the penthouse. Caitlin woke to a series of low-pitched vibrations as Jared's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her heart kicked up. A message from Derek, or maybe Wilson, could mean either progress or an alarming turn in the investigation. She glanced at Jared, who was stirring awake. His features, though handsome as ever, looked drawn from another restless night. Outside, clouds hung overhead, promising a gloomy day. Caitlin squeezed Jared's hand as he checked the phone. His gaze flicked over the screen, brow creasing. "Derek again," he murmured, thumbing quickly across the messages. "He's got pictures of Cross leaving that private office last night. Fletcher was parked nearby. Derek couldn't see any documents changing hands, but he's sure something was exchanged inside." Caitlin rubbed her eyes, pushing aside the last vestiges of sleep. "So we've got the photos, the audio, the partial financial records. Is it enough?" Jared let out a breath, shoulders still tense. "I'm not certain. Derek's found evidence but not a smoking gun. Some explicit contract or proof of money exchanging hands for sabotage. Without that, Cross can claim it's all circumstantial. He might say the conversation in the lounge was taken out of context or that the pictures mean nothing." She sank back against the pillows, frustration churning in her stomach. "So we keep waiting, gathering any shred of evidence we can get. Meanwhile, Cross might finalize his plan any moment." Jared nodded grimly. "Yes, and if he rushes the final deal, we risk losing everything. But Wilson wants to be absolutely sure we can corner him legally. We can't blow the whistle too soon." He rose, heading to the window. Beneath him sprawled the metropolis, subdued under morning's pale light. Caitlin watched him, understanding how helpless he felt. For a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and forging corporate alliances, being forced into a waiting game must feel excruciating. She carefully got out of bed and moved to stand beside him, her hand slipping around his waist. "We'll get through this," she said softly. letting her cheek rest against his shoulder. "Let's try to keep a little faith." His tension eased at her closeness, and for a minute they just looked out at the city. Then her phone chimed. She glanced at it, relief crossing her face. "It's Tessa," she told him. "She's checking if we want to meet for brunch before she heads out of town." Tessa had extended her stay a few times to support Caitlin, but real life beckoned her back, and given the swirling chaos, Caitlin sensed Tessa might also need a break from it all. Jared's mouth twitched into a half smile. "You deserve a break. Go see her. I'll be at the office anyway, dealing with half a dozen meetings." A flicker of regret passed in his eyes. "I wish I could come, but there's too much at stake. My presence at the company is crucial right now." She squeezed his hand. "I know. Don't worry. Tessa and I will just have a quick meal. You do what you have to do." They dressed in silence. Him in a crisp navy suit. Her in a simple patterned dress that accommodated her gently rounded abdomen. They shared a few more quiet moments over coffee. Jared reviewing some documents that needed his signature. Caitlin trying to focus on a pregnancy nutrition article. But neither could fully concentrate, both minds drifting to the clandestine battle with Cross. Eventually Jared headed out, pressing a tender goodbye kiss to Caitlin's forehead. "Text me if you need anything," he reminded. Then he was gone, leaving the penthouse feeling too large, too empty. Tessa chose a bright, plant-filled cafe for their brunch rendezvous. Caitlin arrived to find her friend seated at a corner table beneath hanging ferns, sipping a freshly squeezed orange juice. The sight was refreshing. Someone from her old life, unconnected to the daily intrigues of Brant Tech. As soon as Tessa spotted Caitlin, she stood up, greeting her with an enthusiastic hug. "I'm so glad you made it," Tessa said, motioning for Caitlin to sit. "How are you holding up? You look tired." Caitlin attempted a reassuring smile, though she knew Tessa could see through it. "I'm okay, just everything's intense right now. Jared's got a lot on his plate." Tessa reached across the small table, gripping Caitlin's hand. "You guys have been under the microscope for weeks. I can't imagine how draining that must be." Then, lowering her voice, "Is the baby doing all right?" Caitlin nodded, grateful for the question. "Yes, we're both healthy. The doctor says all is well. The baby's heartbeat is strong." She felt a spark of warmth at the thought, remembering the flicker on the ultrasound screen. They ordered brunch, avocado toast for Caitlin, a veggie omelet for Tessa, and continued talking about lighter topics. Tessa's job, shared memories from their teenage years, the funny moments from Caitlin's early training as a nurse. For a while, Caitlin could almost pretend the only changes in her life were the sweet flutter of her growing baby and the excitement of a new romance. But reality intruded when Tessa's phone chimed with a news alert. She peeked at it, frowned, then glanced hesitantly at Caitlin. "A new article about Jared?" she asked softly. Caitlin's heart sank. "Let me see." Tessa showed her the screen. The headline read, "Exclusive. Documents reveal reckless overspending at Brant Tech. Is the CEO losing control?" Beneath it, a snippet claimed unnamed inside sources had discovered lavish expenditures that threatened the company's stability. Another dig, likely planted by Cross or someone in cahoots, to erode investor confidence. Caitlin pressed her lips together. "Total lies," she muttered, scanning the flimsy details. Brant Tech finances are stable. Jared's entire approach is strategic, not reckless. She wanted to toss the phone aside. "I hate how they twist things." Tessa's eyes flashed sympathy. "People will read anything scandalous. I'm sorry, Kate. This must be so frustrating." Caitlin closed her eyes briefly, controlling her anger. "I just want to protect Jared and the baby from all this. But there's so much I can't control." She set Tessa's phone down carefully, determined not to let it ruin the tiny break in her day. "Anyway, let's talk about something else, please," she said, forcing a small smile. Tessa nodded, understanding. They steered the conversation back to baby clothes, Tessa's plan for her next business trip, and half-formed ideas about Caitlin's potential future as a nurse practitioner. By the time they parted ways, hugging on the sidewalk, Caitlin felt a mixture of gratitude and lingering tension. She was glad to see Tessa, but the swirl of false rumors kept humming in the background. Meanwhile, Jared was locked in a strategy meeting with Wilson and Maya in a private office at Brant Tech. They were reviewing the day's tasks when the news alert about overspending popped up on Jared's laptop. His face hardened as he skimmed the allegations. "Cross must be ramping up his attacks," he said, jaw clenched. "No one else stands to benefit from painting me as fiscally irresponsible right before a major product launch. Investors might panic." Maya's brow furrowed. "That's the last thing we need. We're on schedule. But if the board becomes uneasy about finances, they might push for a leadership shift. I can see them saying, 'We want new management to reassure the market.'" Wilson tapped a pen on the desk. "Let's not let it spiral. I can coordinate with PR to release actual data about the product's projected revenue, the updated financials. We can do so carefully, emphasizing transparency without revealing sensitive details." Jared nodded, tension throbbing in his temples. "Do it. We need to keep the board from fracturing. Cross wants an internal meltdown, so I'll address the board directly tomorrow. Present the real numbers, quell doubts." Maya leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "That might work, as long as Cross doesn't throw in more incendiary rumors." Jared's gaze flicked to Wilson. "We still need a knockout punch, something that shows Cross's motivations. How's Derek's angle on those financial traces? Has he found the competitor's name or a direct payoff?" Wilson exhaled. "Not yet. He's pinned down a network of shell companies, but they're notoriously difficult to connect definitively to Cross. We're close, though. Give us another 24 to 48 hours. 24 to 48 hours. Jared's mind raced, envisioning how much damage Cross could inflict in that window, but he forced himself to remain calm. "All right, we'll brace for tomorrow's board meeting. Meanwhile, I want a simple, factual press statement out tonight. Let's starve these rumors of oxygen." They adjourned, each stepping back into the storm with renewed resolve. Jared felt exhaustion tugging at him. If not for the desire to keep Caitlin and the baby safe, he might have walked away from the board drama. But Brant Tech was his creation, his legacy, and no one, especially not a manipulator like Edmund Cross, would steal it from him. Late that evening, Caitlin returned to the penthouse before Jared, finding it dark and silent. Usually she'd savor the quiet, but tonight it felt unsettling. She couldn't help glancing at her phone for updates from Jared, or from Derek, or even from Tessa. Nothing new, just the hush of an early autumn night pressing around her. She fixed herself a light dinner, forcing down bites between anxious thoughts. She'd hoped for a normal conversation with Jared over a meal, but he was still at the office. She tried distracting herself with a documentary, but after 20 minutes, she realized she wasn't paying attention. The swirl of images on screen barely registered. Finally, close to 9 o'clock, Jared slipped in with his key. He looked drained, tie loosened, eyes ringed with fatigue. Caitlin stood up, heart twisting at his weary expression. "You haven't eaten, have you?" she asked softly. He shook his head, giving her a rueful smile. Lost track of time. Meetings stacked up. He crossed the living room in a few strides to embrace her, relief washing over his features. "I'm glad you're here," he murmured against her hair. She felt a rush of empathy. "I saved some food. Let me heat it up." She guided him to the kitchen, rummaging to plate leftovers. As he sank onto a stool, Jared recounted the day's events in low, measured tones. The contrived rumor about overspending, Wilson's plan to release factual data, the upcoming board meeting. "I'll have to address them head-on tomorrow," he concluded. "Pretend I have no idea Cross is behind these rumors, but still reassure everyone. It's an exhausting dance." Caitlin handed him a heated plate of pasta, resting a hand on his shoulder. I wish I could help more. A pang of guilt flashed across her face. I hate that I'm just here, waiting. He caught her hand, pressing it gently. You're helping. Every time I see you, I remember why I'm fighting. And you've given me the best reason to see this through. Our child. Don't underestimate that. She laced her fingers with his. Then I'll keep believing in you. Just promise me you'll try to rest after this board meeting. You can't keep burning at both ends. He nodded. I promise. Once we corner cross, maybe we can breathe again. They took the conversation to the couch after he finished dinner, the city lights glimmering behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. Jared's head lay on the back cushion, exhaustion claiming him. Caitlin curled up beside him, one hand resting protectively on her belly. The intimacy of that position felt like a balm, even though tension still simmered in the air. Eventually they found themselves dozing off, lulled by each other's presence. No matter how fierce the outside storm, this penthouse, this quiet shared space, remained their refuge. Each beat of Caitlin's heart against Jared's chest anchored them in a promise. No matter how Cross plotted or how the board wavered, they'd face it together. Because beneath corporate wars and tabloid storms, they were forging something stronger. Family, hope, and a future that no traitor could destroy. Tomorrow would bring more battles. But tonight, they clung to a moment's peace, lulled by the gentle hum of the city below. Morning sunlight filtered through a high haze as Jared steered his sleek sedan toward Brant Tech's headquarters. The building's mirrored exterior reflected the sky's subdued glow, turning everything into a kind of metallic haze. A mild tension thrummed in his chest, more potent than usual. Today was the board meeting. The day he'd either secure confidence and progress or see Cross's machinations escalate. He parked in his reserved spot, the engine's hum fading. Pausing for a steadying breath, Jared glanced at his phone. No new urgent messages from Wilson or Derek. That could be good or bad. No crises, but also no fresh evidence. He slipped the phone into his pocket, stepping out into the crisp air. Inside the soaring lobby, employees greeted him with polite nods. Some offered encouraging smiles. They'd seen the tabloids swirl and guessed the CEO was fighting more battles than usual. Jared returned their gestures with as much poise as he could muster. He wanted them to know he was still at the helm, unwavering, despite the undercurrents of corporate sabotage. Reaching the 40th floor, he paused outside the double doors to the main boardroom. Through the glass, he glimpsed a few members already present. Ms. Fletcher, her expression stony, reading through some documents, Maya Ellis, tapping her pen and reviewing notes, and Edmund Cross himself. The older man stood near the far windows, arms folded behind his back, outwardly calm. A swirl of conflicting emotions gripped Jared. Anger, disappointment, a quiet determination. Cross might have convinced half this board that Jared was reckless. He might be orchestrating a stealth takeover, but Jared wouldn't cede an inch. He pushed the door open, stepping inside with a courteous smile. "Morning, everyone," he said, crossing to his seat at the table's head. Cross turned, adopting a diplomatic facade. "Jared," he greeted. His eyes flickered with veiled amusement, as if daring Jared to show his hand. Jared simply nodded, refusing to take the bait. Maya offered a more genuine nod. "Morning," she said, quietly sliding Jared a copy of the day's agenda. Fletcher gave him a short greeting, eyes betraying little. Others arrived in a small flurry, some hurrying, some confident, each taking their usual chairs. When all were present, Jared began. "Thank you for joining this session. We have critical matters to address before the final AI launch, namely, the budget confirmations, updated market forecasts, and the wave of media speculation about our financial stability." A low murmur spread. Cross cleared his throat. "Yes, about those rumors. I've heard from certain circles that we're overspending and might compromise our liquidity." He glanced at Jared. "Is that true? Or do we have updated figures to refute it?" The question was poised with feigned innocence, as though Cross were a concerned colleague. Jared's hands curled under the table. He called up a presentation on the monitor behind him, displaying meticulously compiled data. We've prepared a thorough breakdown of expenditures versus projected revenues for the next 3 quarters. He clicked through slides, explaining each chart. You'll see that our R&D investments are within the normal range for a major launch, and our pre-orders, while not publicly disclosed, are strong enough to offset initial costs. Fletcher scanned the screen, lips pursed. So the rumors about reckless spending are false? Jared nodded confidently. Absolutely false. These numbers come from verified accounting records. We maintain healthy liquidity ratios, and we have strategic reserves for unforeseen challenges. A few board members relaxed in their chairs, murmuring in relief. But Cross leaned forward, elbows on the table, face etched with skepticism. Yes, but can you guarantee these projections will hold if something unplanned occurs, such as a delay or further negative press? Jared's gaze met Cross's. Delays or negative press wouldn't come from nowhere, Edmund. If we remain unified and transparent, the product will speak for itself. We've tested it extensively and prepared contingency plans. Cross offered a thin smile. I suppose we'll have to trust that your personal distractions won't interfere. A hush gripped the room. Jared felt a flicker of heat, Cross referencing the baby or Caitlin, no doubt, but he kept his composure. My focus remains on Brant Tech. That hasn't changed. Maya cleared her throat, stepping in diplomatically. The numbers are reassuring, and marketing has ramped up. If we stand behind Jared's leadership, we'll see a successful launch. Several nodded. One board member chimed, "This data should quell the media's speculation. Let's confirm any final budget lines, then proceed." A wave of relief washed over Jared. While Cross shot barbs, others were seeing reason. The meeting went on for nearly 2 hours, discussing distribution strategies, final QA phases, timelines for international rollout. Gradually, the tension around the table thawed. Jared took every question seriously, exuding calm assurance. For a moment, it felt like a normal board session, united by a goal. But near the end, Cross spoke up again. "Before we adjourn, I want to mention something." He eyed the group, then Jared. "I've heard from a reputable source that a competitor is developing parallel AI. If they beat us to market, or if our launch is compromised, we could lose our edge. Should we consider hedging our bets, perhaps delaying release until we can ensure absolute readiness?" Jared almost laughed at the audacity. Cross was proposing exactly what his private scheme aimed to force, delaying the product so the rival could catch up or overshadow Brant Tech. He forced a thoughtful expression. "Our readiness is high, Edmund. Our engineers confirm we're on track. Delaying now would undermine the confidence we've just established." A few board members frowned, perplexed by Cross's suggestion. Fletcher glanced at Cross, confusion wrinkling her brow. "Are you saying we should sabotage ourselves by pushing back? That would only feed more rumors." Cross offered a tight-lipped shrug. "I'm merely being cautious. A flawless launch might be better than a rushed one." Jared let a breath slip. "We're not rushing. This is the timeline we set over a year ago. Unless new evidence suggests we're not prepared, we proceed." A quiet tension crackled. Finally, Fletcher and others agreed, effectively shooting down Cross's idea. The meeting adjourned. People gathered their folders, some engaging in side conversations. Cross lingered, locking eyes with Jared in a silent, charged moment. Then he turned on his heel and departed, suit jacket flaring behind him. Maya approached Jared. "That was intense. You handled it well." She lowered her voice. "What's Cross's real aim here? He's acting like he wants us to fail." Jared played it cool. "Maybe he's just overcautious," he said, though he suspected Maya already suspected more. "Thanks for your support. Let's finalize the marketing rollout." She nodded, eyes reflective. then left. Jared sank into his chair, letting a trickle of relief pass through him. For now, he'd kept the board on track. But Cross had thrown another jab, planting seeds of doubt. Back at the penthouse mid-afternoon, Caitlin was busy researching potential baby names. She'd found a few she liked, scribbling them on a notepad. She paused at the name Amelia, circling it thoughtfully. She liked how it felt graceful, yet strong. And Ethan for a boy, maybe. But an undercurrent of anxiety still tugged at her. She checked her phone, no major updates from Jared or Wilson. She tried to push away the restlessness, reminding herself that sometimes no news was good news. Then, in a burst of impulse, she decided to do something to alleviate her sense of helplessness. She put down the baby name list and picked up her phone, tapping Tessa's number. Her friend answered on the second ring. "Kate, everything okay?" "Yeah," Caitlin said softly, pacing near the window. I want to help. Jared's dealing with so much, the sabotage, the rumors. But I'm stuck here, feeling useless. Do you think there's anything I can do beyond moral support?" Tessa hummed. "You mentioned you used to be good at noticing small details when you worked night shifts. Maybe you can help track something, connect dots. But you don't want to step on Jared's investigators' toes." Caitlin nodded. "I know, but I have time on my hands. Maybe I can recheck those tabloids, look for patterns in how they're publishing info, timings, phrasing. If we spot a pattern linking it to Cross's moves, that might help." "That's actually smart," Tessa said. "Do it carefully, though. Maybe run your findings by Jared or Wilson. They might see if it lines up with the financial leads." Energy pulsed through Caitlin. "Thanks, Tessa. I'll try that. It's better than sitting and worrying." She ended the call, scooped up her laptop, and settled on the living room couch. For the next hour, she combed through article after article from the last 2 months. She looked at timestamps, authors, the angles each rumor took. She noticed that certain tabloids specialized in mocking Jared's personal life, like his alleged temper or reckless spending, while others hammered the idea that the AI product was behind schedule or unstable. She made notes. First rumor, about Jared's accident and Caitlin's role, broke 3 days before the official press release. Second rumor, money mismanagement, dropped soon after talk of the AI's alpha tests. Third rumor popped up right before a major investor meeting. Each rumor seemed timed to coincide with a pivotal business event. Caitlin's eyes widened. Could that synergy be Cross's strategy, striking whenever Jared needed a strong public stance? As she kept digging, she noticed repeated references to a certain journalist's byline, someone named Patricia Lang. This Lang person wrote for an outlet that typically covered soft celebrity gossip, yet they somehow had detailed financial leaks. Odd. Caitlin typed the name into a search, scanning for any link to Cross or the rumored competitor. The results were mostly trivial, but one item caught her attention. Patricia Lang once did a profile piece on an executive rumored to be connected to Cross's potential partner firm. Her pulse quickened. She jotted it down. If the same journalist had special access to corporate rumors, maybe she was their funnel. Could be a direct pipeline from Cross. She wasn't certain, but it felt like a breadcrumb. She took screenshots, copying links into a document. Time slipped by as she pieced together a rough timeline. The baby gave a few gentle kicks, as if reminding her not to push too hard. She rubbed her belly fondly, whispering, "We're okay, little one. Just trying to help your dad." Eventually, Jared's key rattled in the door. The sky outside had already shifted into late afternoon gold. Caitlin closed her laptop and stood, meeting him at the entrance. He looked exhausted but not defeated. Relief flickered in his eyes upon seeing her. "Hey," he murmured, leaning in for a soft kiss. "Board meeting was intense, but I think we avoided a meltdown. Cross tried to push for a delay, but everyone else sided with me." Caitlin guided him to the couch. "That's good. I've been doing some investigating of my own." She opened her notes, showing him the timeline of rumored stories and the suspiciously timed articles by Patricia Lang. "It might not be conclusive, but I see a pattern. Every time you have a key step, like the alpha test or investor meetings, someone leaks discrediting stories days prior. This journalist is recurring in about half those leaks." Jared's eyebrows rose. "That's impressive, and it aligns with how Cross might operate, planting doubts precisely when we need stability." He scanned her notes, nodding in admiration. "We can pass this to Wilson. If we cross-match the publication dates with suspicious communications from Cross's end, it might strengthen our case." A stirring of pride warmed Caitlin. She felt purposeful, at least in this small way. "I just don't want to stand by while he tries to undermine you. We need to get this resolved before the baby arrives." Jared placed a gentle hand on her belly. "We will," he vowed quietly. "I won't let Cross or anyone overshadow what we're building here." He paused, eyes meeting hers. "Seeing you do this, it means a lot. More than you know." She laced her fingers with his, leaning her forehead against his. "We're a team," she whispered. "We fight together." In that moment, the swirl of corporate warfare receded, replaced by the slow pulse of connection between them. They spent the next hour comparing her timeline with details Jared remembered from each rumor's release. The synergy was striking. Each rumor exploded within 48 to 72 hours of an internal milestone or meeting. Coupled with the audio implicating Cross, the pattern was shaping into a strong argument. When they finally set aside their notes, the sun had dipped low, painting the living room with a warm amber glow. They realized they'd forgotten dinner, lost in their collaboration. But for once, the tension had turned into a quiet sense of momentum. They were no longer reactive. Together, they were piecing a puzzle that could corner Cross definitively. Caitlin glanced down at the gentle curve of her belly, hope kindling in her chest. The child within deserved a future free from sabotage and toxic intrigues, and Jared, for all his brilliance and composure, deserved a victory that reaffirmed his vision, both as a CEO and a soon-to-be father who refused to buckle under betrayal. Tomorrow would be another step closer, another day to gather clues, finalize their trap. But as Jared pulled her close, pressing a tender kiss to her temple, Caitlin allowed herself a small breath of optimism. They weren't alone. They had each other, and that unwavering partnership was exactly what Edmund Cross and his conspirators had underestimated. A brisk autumn wind swept across the city skyline, rattling window panes as morning arrived. Despite the growing chill outside, the penthouse was alive with a spark of anticipation. Caitlin stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of warm tea, while Jared flipped through a folder at the counter. Both knew that today could mark the culmination of everything they'd uncovered, a day of reckoning for Edmund Cross's sabotage. They'd hardly slept. After assembling Caitlin's timeline of leaked stories, the evidence from Derek, and the audio clip from Jared's secret recording, they'd decided it was enough to confront Cross openly. Wilson, their legal advisor, had scheduled an urgent board meeting for that afternoon. Nobody outside their tight circle knew the real purpose, save for one or two supportive board members told only a fragment of the story. "I wish we didn't have to do this so dramatically," Caitlin murmured. The tension in the air made her stomach flutter, not the gentle, hopeful flutters of pregnancy, but the anxiety-laced sort. "But I know we need to. He's pushed things too far." Jared set the folder down, exhaling. "Believe me, I'd prefer a quieter resolution, but Cross left us no choice. He's using the media, using lies. It's time to cut this off at the root. We'll present the evidence, demand his resignation. If he resists, we're ready with legal charges." His gaze softened as he looked at her. "And no matter what happens, your safety, our baby's safety, comes first. If Cross or any ally tries something reckless, we'll have security on hand." Caitlin nodded, a note of gratitude in her eyes. She carried a protective instinct of her own, but took comfort in Jared's steady resolve. "We'll be okay," she said. "I believe that." They spent the morning reviewing final details with Wilson over a secure video call. Derek patched in to confirm he'd keep watch in the building's lobby, ready to intercept Cross if he tried to slip away mid-meeting. As the clock ticked toward noon, Jared donned a dark suit with crisp lines, the very picture of a CEO who'd regained full confidence. Caitlin, determined to stand at his side, chose a polished blouse and maternity slacks that looked professional yet comfortable enough for her changing body. Before they left, they shared a quiet moment by the window, the city's towers stretching out below. Jared's arm slipped around her waist. "Once this is behind us," he said in a gentle tone, "we focus on preparing for the baby, right? No more living under a storm cloud." Her lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. "Absolutely. Let's get this done." Arriving at Brant Tech's imposing high-rise, they rode the elevator up to the boardroom floor in near silence. Caitlin's nerves hummed, recalling the countless times she'd wandered hospital hallways instead, places where her mission was to heal and comfort. Now she was stepping into a confrontation that felt as high stakes as any life-or-death scenario, albeit on a different battlefield. As they stepped out, Wilson greeted them. He quietly led them to a private office adjacent to the boardroom where Maya stood waiting. Maya's expression held relief at the sight of Caitlin. "I didn't realize you'd be here in person," she said softly. "It's good to have moral support, I imagine." Caitlin nodded. "We need to show unity, and I want Cross to see we're not afraid." She tried to steady her breathing. Jared gave a quick squeeze to her hand before addressing Wilson. "Everything set?" Wilson motioned to a laptop. "We have the audio queued, the timeline of leaks, the suspicious financial logs. Once we gather the board, we'll present it step by step." Jared closed his eyes briefly, mustering focus. "Let's do it." Inside the boardroom, the mood was strangely charged. Most members wore puzzled expressions, having been summoned to an unscheduled emergency briefing. Edmund Cross sat near the far end, outwardly calm, but with a certain stiffness in his posture. Ms. Fletcher and a few others exchanged uneasy glances. Clearly they sensed something big was about to unfold. Jared stepped to the front. Caitlin stood off to the side next to Wilson, but her eyes stayed locked on Jared. Maya took her seat, arms crossed, prepared for the revelations. "Thank you all for coming," Jared began, voice firm. "I apologize for the abrupt meeting, but circumstances demand immediate attention. Brant Tech has faced repeated leaks and rumors designed to harm our reputation and undermine our upcoming AI launch. We now have conclusive evidence that someone on this board is responsible." A ripple of murmurs spread. Cross arched a brow, feigning surprise. "Quite an accusation, Jared. This is a serious matter. Are you certain you're not exaggerating?" Jared's expression hardened. "Wilson, please present what we have." Wilson cleared his throat, projecting calm authority. "Over the past months, we documented multiple instances where private Brant Tech information surfaced in tabloid articles. The timing matched critical milestones for our AI product, causing maximum damage to public perception. We traced these leaks to a journalist named Patricia Lang, who has direct ties to a competitor developing a parallel AI solution. Through cross-referencing internal communications and financial records, we discovered suspicious shell accounts culminating in repeated transactions linked to none other than Edmund Cross. A stunned silence fell. Several board members turned toward Cross, eyes widening. Fletcher's face went pale, as though recalling her own sightings of Cross's odd behavior. Cross forced a laugh. "Ridiculous. You can't pin random leaks on me. This could be any corporate espionage or even employees seeking bribes. How dare you smear my name without proper proof?" Wilson clicked a button. and the overhead monitor displayed a timeline linking each tabloid rumor to coinciding board events. Next, a snippet of a screenshot showed partial bank statements under a shell corporation, dates and amounts correlating suspiciously with the publication schedule. Finally, Jared stepped forward again. And if that isn't enough, there's also this. He nodded to Wilson, who played a carefully edited clip of the secret audio from the City Club lounge. Cross's voice rang out, cold and unmistakable. "We just need a bit of strategic sabotage. If I can ensure the timeline falters, the market will be more receptive. No one can suspect me." Gasping murmurs exploded around the table. Cross's mouth fell open. He clenched the armrests, color draining from his cheeks. This is entrapment," he sputtered. "That recording is out of context, illegally obtained." Jared's voice cut through. "Context is clear enough. You plotted with a competitor to undermine Brant Tech's launch. You used personal attacks on me and my family as distractions, fueling scandal. You tried to force a product delay so the rival could catch up or overshadow us. These records tie your finances to that competitor's leadership." He paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. "It's over, Edmund." Around the table, some members looked furious, others bewildered. Fletcher's hand covered her mouth as she whispered, "My God, all that talk about caution was just you sabotaging us from the inside." Cross's gaze darted from face to face, fear flickering behind his eyes. I had legitimate concerns. You can't do this. None of it will stand in court. This is a smear campaign." Wilson stepped in. "We have enough probable cause to press charges for conspiracy. You abused your position as a board member to orchestrate sabotage. We've already prepared formal legal documents. Unless you step down and relinquish your shares at fair market value, we'll proceed with a criminal complaint." Cross slumped back, desperation twisting his features. Then anger overcame him. "You sanctimonious fools! Jard Brant doesn't deserve to lead this company. He's a reckless CEO too mired in personal melodrama. I did what was necessary to keep Brant Tech from spiraling under his so-called leadership." Maya stood, voice trembling with anger. "You risked thousands of jobs and the future of our biggest project, all because of some misguided vendetta. You lied to me, to all of us." Cross glared, but the tension in the room made it clear he was outnumbered. He wavered, then rose stiffly, snatching his briefcase. "I'll consult my lawyer," he spat. "This is far from finished." "Actually, it is," Jared said, measured. "Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you out. Consider yourself relieved of duties until further notice." Cross shot him a venomous look, then stormed out. A stunned hush remained behind, broken only by the collective exhale of the rest of the board. Some turned to Jard, relief mingled with shock. Fletcher swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry I ever doubted you. I had no idea Cross was capable of that." Jard managed a weary nod. "We'll survive. Thank you for standing by the truth." With Cross gone, the atmosphere lifted, though the board was left reeling from the betrayal. Jard quickly summarized a plan to reassure investors, reaffirm the AI launch schedule, and publicly announce Cross's resignation for personal reasons if he cooperated, or a formal investigation if he didn't. The board members agreed, many praising Jared's calm leadership in ferreting out the traitor. Half an hour later, Jared emerged from the boardroom, heart still pounding. The corridor felt surreal. His entire future had hinged on that confrontation. He spotted Caitlin waiting near the elevator, her posture tense until she saw him. One look at his expression told her everything had gone as planned. A wave of relief lit her face. She hurried to him, arms outstretched. "Thank goodness!" Her voice caught as she pressed against him. "You did it!" He exhaled shakily, wrapping her in a tight hug. "We did it," he corrected softly. "Your timeline research, Derek's vigilance, Wilson's guidance. We all played a part." She pulled back, eyes shining. How's everyone taking it?" He guided her toward a quieter corner. Stunned, mostly, but supportive. Cross tried to bluster his way out, but the evidence was overwhelming. He rubbed his face, exhaustion mingling with triumph. "We have to finalize the legal angle, but the immediate threat is gone. The smear campaigns should die off once we publicly clarify the truth." Caitlin placed a hand on her abdomen, emotional relief flooding her. "So no more sabotage? No more tabloids painting you as reckless?" Jared's lips curved into the first genuine smile in weeks. "Not from Cross, at least. We'll watch out for any last-ditch moves, but I think he's finished." Leaning in, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Now we can focus on launching the product and preparing for our baby without that cloud hanging over us." Her eyes brimmed with grateful tears. She thought of the nights spent anxious, the endless swirl of rumors. "I can't believe it's finally over." He stroked her hair tenderly. "Me neither, but I feel free." They arrived home just after dusk, the sky turning a deep violet over the penthouse windows. For once, the tension that greeted them was of a different sort, almost a giddy relief. Caitlin bustled around, whipping up a quick dinner. Jared changed into something more comfortable, releasing the day's weight from his shoulders. Over plates of simple pasta, they recounted the final confrontation in more detail. Caitlin laughed in a burst of pent-up emotion when Jared described Cross's shocked expression, though her eyes shone with compassion for the employees Cross had deceived. After dinner, they curled on the sofa, joined by Tessa on video call for a quick update. Tessa cheered, practically jumping on the screen, congratulating them on exposing the sabotage. Caitlin felt tears of joy forming. She realized how heavily the battle had weighed on her. Tessa promised to visit soon to celebrate properly. When they finally hung up, the city lights glowed outside. Caitlin rested her head on Jared's shoulder, letting contentment wash over them both. From a near-fatal accident, to pregnancy, to corporate sabotage, she mused, "I guess we like doing things the hard way." Jared chuckled, leaning in to kiss her temple. "At least we'll have stories to tell our child when they're older, about how we overcame everything to make this life for them." She gave a happy sigh, sliding a hand over her belly. "Yeah, and maybe now I can figure out how to return to nursing in some capacity, or maybe get involved with Brant Tech's healthcare initiatives. I want to use my skills to help people, not hide away." He nodded. "I'd love to support that. Anything that combines your passion for healing with my resources. We can talk about starting a foundation or a clinic. The possibilities are endless now that we don't have to fight sabotage at every turn." Silence stretched, comfortable and intimate. Their hands intertwined, gazes drifting to the future that beckoned. The swirl of city lights reminded them that the world beyond those windows was still chaotic, yet no longer menacing. Tomorrow, Jared would face a new day as CEO with renewed backing from the board, free from Cross's betrayal. Caitlin would begin exploring how to balance her calling as a nurse with her place at his side, confident that together they'd navigate whatever lay ahead. "Thank you," Jared whispered, voice raw with emotion. Caitlin tilted her head in question. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to hold on, for saving my life in that hospital, for believing in me when so many questioned my decisions, and for building a family with me, no matter how crazy our world gets." She felt tears prick her eyes, a soft smile lifting her lips. "Always," she promised. "You saved me in return, you know, showed me that love can be stronger than any headline or betrayal." He kissed her, gentle and unhurried, sealing the quiet victory they'd earned. Outside, the city breathed under the night sky. In the penthouse's warm glow, Jared and Caitlin found peace at last. Their child's arrival lay just around the corner, offering a new chapter of hope untainted by sabotage or secrets. And as they closed their eyes, entwined on the sofa, they both knew that the love they'd fought for was unbreakable, a testament that no matter how fierce the storms, A shared resolve could steer them safely toward tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen